record. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, hang on. We've got a technical difficulty. There we go. We're good. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the core Zelda pseudo Lorerun. Now, I want to explain this a little bit, mostly because I was asked to. You're welcome, Darth Charman. I am glad you're enjoying it. I know Bragwin hates it with a fiery passion, though, so it's understandable. So obviously a Lorerun is a Lorerun. I feel like I don't even have to explain that one. But a pseudo Lorerun is a more recent concept that we've basically had to come up with. It doesn't really mean anything per se, because the overall mentality and approach is exactly the same as a Lorerun. The difference is there's larger sections where we don't have anything to talk about. Basically, the difference between a Lorerun and a pseudo Lorerun is a matter of density. So a game like Final Fantasy, we have tons and tons of stuff to talk about. A game like Half-Life, we don't. So thank you very, very much upon a time. As always, much appreciate and much obliged the support and the sub. Thank you. If you happen to know where you want to put that, let me know. Anyways, so that's the difference. That's really the only difference between a Lorerun and a pseudo Lorerun. Now, before I move forward, I do want to say, you're welcome, Pep Dog. It's awesome. One of the more common comments I got on the original WoW Lorerun was how people weren't aware of how much story and how much depth and breadth to the lore there was in World of Warcraft, and thanking me for introducing them to that. So that's awesome, because I think that WoW's lore, not current expansion notwithstanding, is awesome and is the kind of thing that more people should be able to enjoy and share. Even though I feel the WoW Lorerun kind of sucks, but that's mostly because of limitations of the tech at the time. But anyways, you got it upon a time. Let me jot that down really quick. So, this is what I'm calling a core Lorerun. Now, for anybody who's paying attention to the website, you'll notice that there's only 3 games listed. Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and then Wind Waker, in that order. And we're going to go ahead and do that in said order. Now, I bring that up because Zelda as a franchise is kind of, how do I phrase this, weird. I intend to talk about this basically right now, but the Zelda series let's rewind a little bit. Legend of Zelda, the original, was designed to be an adventure. Kind of like Final Fantasy I, to use a direct parallel. They didn't really plan for a lot of story elements, but it's inaccurate to say that there's an absence of story, right? It's just there wasn't a story focus in both games' case, actually. However, both games, Final Fantasy and Zelda, decided to move into story focus as a direct consequence of a game called Mother. And so we ended up having Final Fantasy II, which was very story-focused, and Legend of Zelda 2, which wasn't very story-focused, but far more story-focused than Zelda 1 was. And also, arguably, the only real Zelda RPG we've had. Now, what's interesting to me is the Zelda franchise is filled with orcs beating up Alliance. Death to the Alliance! I'm kidding. The Zelda franchise followed a trend basically up until Twilight Princess, and that trend was more story focus. No, seriously, each successive Zelda game emphasized the story axis more and more and more and more, basically up until Twilight. Now, there are some exceptions to that, of course. And then, in more recent years, they've started to push away from story focus. Now, I have only the beginnings of suspicions as to where this is going, or why, more accurately, this is happening. But there's definitely been a strong push away from more story emphasis in some of the more recent Zeldas. The biggest and most obvious example being Breath of the Wild, in which the actual writers and developers have flat out said, we have deliberately withheld story elements of this game so that you can make up your own story, because that's what we wanted, and blah, blah, blah. Now, whether that will continue or not, I have no idea. After all, we are getting a Breath of the Wild sequel, which appears to have a much stronger story focus. We'll see when we get there. I don't really know. but it is a very strange trend that they've been going through, because it's also not a consistent trend. And this is overall the point I'm trying to make. The reason this, I swear this is tied up to the core Lorerun concept, because the Zelda franchise started off as an adventure, and then they wanted to turn it into an RPG, and then they wanted to turn it into a story, and then they wanted to turn it into an even bigger story, and then a bigger story, and then a bigger story, and then a bigger story, and then it seemed like they had no idea what they were doing. I don't really mean that as an insult, but it really felt like at a certain point they sat back and said, okay, now what? And so we have problems like Minish Cap, which was supposed to be the origin story for the franchise. And in fact, as I will point out whenever we finally play Minish Cap, the Minish Cap game has elements that are still kind of present of it being an origin story, but then they're just ignored or retconned within the game itself because of the fact that in mid-development, Minish Cap was told, no, we're making Skyward, so Skyward's going to be the new origin story. So Minish Cap doesn't have anything to do with anything. And then we have problems like Four Swords Adventures, which was designed in many ways to be a sequel to Ocarina of Time, until someone somewhere along the line realized that they can't do a sequel to a game that has two sequels, both of which definitively terminated those particular story arcs, Wind Waker and Twilight. Then we have Skyward, which tried to explain the mythos of everything. And we have Link Between Worlds, which an excellent game, by the way, but also basically doesn't have anything to do with anything. And you could kind of see why I say that the story emphasis kind of was reduced, because it's just all over the place, you know what I mean? It really does feel like they were just kind of with a lot of it. Breath of the Wild is included in this, I feel like pointing out. Don't mistake me. I enjoy every single game I just mentioned. But you can tell how it became a lot less connected. Now, what you do, Pep Dog, is you tell me which game you want to put it towards. And then I will jot down, each sub is worth $2. That's how much I get out of a sub, roughly. So I will jot down your interest in a thing, and I'll keep a little note, and later on, probably tonight, I will go ahead and update the website to reflect any donations or subs put towards it. So that's how you do it, Pep Dog. Yeah, Breath of the Wild is a good game. I stand by that firmly. I would even go so far as to say Breath of the Wild is a great game. The only two major flaws with Breath of the Wild for me are the frickin' durability, which was a non-stop issue in that game, and the absence of story. There's a very low story density in Breath of the Wild. Anyways, hence the idea to... So, having said all of that, hence the idea of the core Lorerun. Now, this is Ocarina, which directly leads into Twilight, and Ocarina, which directly leads into Wind Waker. Both Wind Waker and Twilight are what I call direct sequels of Ocarina. Now, I want to explain that briefly, because it's come up several times. So, what's funny is I've had several people just not get this, so I'm going to try to explain this, and I really hope I'm going to succeed at this. An indirect sequel is Majora's Mask. In other words, it happens immediately after Ocarina, follows the same character, and happens in the same setting. But it doesn't really have anything to do with Ocarina. The events of Ocarina have functionally no impact on Majora's Mask. The only connecting points are very vague ones, like the initiator of the quest, looking for Navi, some vague things about the goddesses, etc. But in all ways, Majora's Mask has nothing to do with Ocarina of Time. That is an indirect sequel. It is another episode in the same franchise. A direct sequel is a game that specifically and directly happens as a consequence of the previous game and carries the same story arc. In short, Ocarina to Wind Waker is a single story arc, just as Ocarina to Twilight is a single story arc. But Ocarina to Majora's is two story arcs. You follow me? Now, I thought about including a couple of other games in this because there are other games that are directly connected to what I would consider the core Zelda story. But after some serious thought, I decided to not, and I want to explain my reasons why. First of all, Link to the Past, which is connected to the core storyline, isn't actually all that connected, and it's mostly connected thanks to a retcon, and that really does feel better suited for a an in-depth classic kind of a format. Skyward Sword could be considered directly connected to this, but at the same time, it actually kind of isn't. Skyward Sword really is the mythos. It's the origin story. It's not directly connected to Ocarina any more than Ocarina is directly connected to Minish Cap. It just happens to be happening earlier. Also, Skyward Sword is a game that causes me literal physical harm to play, and I will never, ever play that game again until they finally come up with a frickin' port of it that involves no motion controls. Pet Dog 20 Halo. You got it. Thank you, Pep Dog. Much obliged. So, in short, someone stabbed Baron for me. In short, all of the other... There are others. Majora's Mask, obviously. But as I mentioned, indirect. I could talk about Phantom Hourglass, which is actually kind of an indirect. I could talk about Spirit Tracks, which is kind of an indirect. The point being, every other game felt more like an indirect sequel and not particularly connected to the core trilogy. And someone in chat said it earlier, I forget who it is, please forgive me, but someone made the point, the core trilogy really is the Ganondorf trilogy. As much as Ganon is a recurring villain and Ganondorf is a recurring character, ultimately, there are only 3 games that really dig into Ganondorf as an individual and make him a focus of the story. Ocarina, Twilight, Wind Waker. So in a way, you could call this the Ganondorf lore run, and it would still fit. So this is the final reason why we're doing this as a core trilogy. We are covering the Ganondorf trilogy lore run. Make sense? We will be covering basically all the rest of the Zelda games, except for Skyward, because Skyward can go to hell. And we will also not be playing Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks when we get to the final marathon. And just to explain my reasons for that real quick here, I think Skyward sucks at the end. I mean, I'm sorry, the motion controls hamper Skyward so much. And on the off chance you're named Tyonis and you've never actually played Skyward Sword, I want to try and explain that briefly on the off chance you don't understand. I want you to imagine this is your Wiimote. It's a little big, but you're a giant, so you got a really big one. Thank you very much, Tyonis. Much appreciate and oblige the sub as always. Thank you. If you happen to know where you want to put that, let me know. Now here's the problem. Tesla just said the gameplay of Skyward sucks. I actually don't agree with that. Hear me out. It's the controls of Skyward that sucks. I actually quite enjoy both the combat and the dungeon design of Skyward Sword. I feel that they do some really inventive and awesome stuff with the way they do the layout. And they also did something kind of unique. See, Skyward Sword basically only has 3 dungeons, but you do each of them multiple times and in multiple ways. So it kind of effectively adds to the original experience. And yeah, they do some really cool stuff. The time mechanic, the Silent Realm, Eberron, Now, in other words, and this is one of the reasons the Skyward Sword thing pisses me off so much, if not for this problem, Skyward Sword would be an awesome game, in my opinion. It's got a high story focus. It's got an actual interesting story with legitimate characterization and development. I mean, Groose, among other things. And, of course, it's got legitimately interesting bosses and dungeon and just the usual stuff that a Zelda game should have. It's just 100% hampered because everything you do is every swing of the sword and the specific way how you swing the sword, every little item you use, or all the tools, the bombs and all that stuff, the hook shot, everything is motion controlled. And so 100% of the game feels like you're trying to reach through barbed wire to reach a really nice steak, Again, I say without hyperbole, that game caused me legitimate physical pain. And that was when the game came out. Years ago at this point. So, that's why we're not playing Skyward. And I will never play that game again, regardless of circumstance, unless you guys donate $30 million or whatever to $23 million for me to do that, or they come out with a port that doesn't involve this problem. Now, thank you, Eberron. Sorry, I wanted to get all that out before I said thank you. Thank you very, very much for the sub. Much obliged, sir. And if you'll give me a moment, I will jot that down towards Link's Awakening. I will agree that Demise is probably my least favorite part of Skyward Sword's story. Like, I'll talk about Demise. I have talked about Demise. I talked about it during the Breath of the Wild run. Exactly. See, Beat Nuki understands. Now, I mentioned there's 2 other games we will not be playing on stream regardless. Those would be Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. Now, you might be wondering, why, Lore? I don't have my other DS handy. So, here's my stylus. I'm going to use my Wii U controller to emphasize. So pretend this is my 3DS, right? Or my DS, actually, to be more accurate. So here's how you play Phantom Hourglass. This is the controls of Phantom Hourglass. So, quick slash, that's a slash. Circle, that's trying to do the swing attack. Moving around, that's like this. If you do a tap or a double swing like that, you'll actually do the roll. It's 100% controlled by the stylus, and it's kind of a pain to play. It also happens to have the temple, which can go to hell. It's a damn shame because I actually like Phantom Hourglass, kind of. It's a very innovative game. It's one of the only Zelda games that went way out of its way to use the hardware to its fullest. Some of my favorite aspects of Phantom Hourglass include, but are not limited to, the boss that you fight from its perspective, so your camera is literally changed to be that of the boss's viewpoint when you're fighting him. That's always been a highlight of that game for me. I also really enjoyed some of the puzzles. For example, one of the puzzles, the actual solution is to close your DS. You know, like that. Some cool stuff like that. And yeah, Battletoad's kind of a thing, exactly, Dakota. Except, obviously, a little more mobile, because in 3D, but you get the idea. Linebeck was also a cool character. There was cool stuff. I did like Phantom Hourglass, it's just... it's hampered by its controls. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? Then we have Spirit Tracks. Spirit Tracks has the exact same control scheme, but worse. So I ran into a part... yeah, there's 3 points in Spirit Tracks where you have to sing into the microphone. I'm not kidding. And if you fail at it, you cannot progress. The most recent time I played through Spirit Tracks, I could not beat the game. And that is why. I ran into a wall. Because no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it to acknowledge me saying what it was wanting me to say. Or in the notes that it was wanting me to say. So, screw that. However, other than those 3, we will be playing basically all of the real Zelda games out there. That includes Zelda 1, Zelda 2, Link's Awakening, Link to the Past, Majora's Mask, Link Between Worlds, Oracle of something. Probably only one of the Oracle games, honestly, because the other one, maybe both. I'll try to be convinced by that. What else? We've got Minish Cap, obviously. I already mentioned Majora's. And I feel like there's another... Hyrule Warriors is actually another one I'd like to do for that one. And I think that's it. Pretty sure that's the full list. I haven't decided... oh! And Four Swords Adventures. Thank you for reminding me, Jaluda. Yes, we will also be playing Four Swords Adventures, because I actually like that friggin' game. So, with all that said, no Breath of the Wild? Well, we've already done Breath of the Wild. So, we've already done it. Like, it would almost be fully repetitive to play it again. So, probably not. Obviously, we will be playing Breath of the Wild 2 when it comes out. Speaking of which, what would I like to see from Ganondorf? Characterization. Now, that sounds like a joke, but I mean that with total sincerity. What I want most from Ganondorf in Breath of the Wild 2 is actual freaking characterization. Okay, Bregman, have fun. I think that's everything. I think that's everything. So let's go ahead and hit this button here. So, funny fact, this was the first game Aonuma was really significantly involved in. In fact, Aonuma, for those of you who are not aware of the individual, Aonuma is the gentleman who is probably most associated with Zelda now. He is the head director, head game designer. He is the mainliner of the Zelda franchise, and has been ever since Majora's Mask, which was the first game he mainlined. This game was still being mainlined by Miyamoto, in particular. Now, Aonuma, this is actually funny. Aonuma, I just wanted to share this little anecdote. He got into video gaming because of a couple of random games you've probably never even heard of. And I mean that sincerely this time. In fact, I don't even remember what they are off the top of my head. However, he ended up, while he was working at Nintendo, playing Link to the Past. And Link to the Past really, really worked with him. Just clicked with him. And he's like, oh my god, this is the kind of game I want to make. And he actually approached Miyamoto and was like, I want to have my shot at this. And so Miyamoto got him involved in Link's Awakening, and then got him involved in this one. And apparently, nope, it was the right hand. We're safe, Tesla. Apparently, Miyamoto and the other staff were very impressed with Aonuma because, like I said, he ended up mainlining Majora's Mask. Funny little story, though. This game is actually, as with many other games of this particular era, is absent quite a bit of the content it was supposed to have. In fact, when the 64 DD was actually planned to come out still, you know, that whole disaster, which actually ruined quite a few games while we're talking about it. But anyways, when that was being a thing still, they always planned to do effectively an expansion or a remake to this game to re-add in all of the missing content. Then the 64 DD debacle happened, and as a consequence, they just baked a lot of the ideas they had into what is now referred to as Master Quest. And the core team that was working on the expansion shifted entirely over to Majora's Mask, and somehow banged out Majora's Mask amazingly. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, Mike. He actually asked me a question about it. Lore Reloaded comes to me for Star Trek stuff every now and again. I mentioned that earlier. Anyways. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more before I really get started, because if you'll forgive me, Ocarina of Time, someone in chat already said this, but this bears repeating. Ocarina of Time is the Final Fantasy VII of the Zelda franchise. Oh god, you're right. This game came out the year I started doing this. I didn't even think about that. Ocarina of Time is a huge crowd pleaser. Just like FF7, it is the most popular Zelda game, even to this very day. Just like FF7 is the most popular FF game. Not necessarily the best, not necessarily the highest quality or the most beloved or the highest selling, but definitely the most well-known and most popular, like I said. Hi, Savicom. Now, what's funny is both Ocarina and FF7 kind of became so popular for the same general reasons, because it was such a unique point in gaming history. As I've mentioned many times in my discussions about video game history, which is a topic that's fascinating to me, right about when the PS1 and N64 were coming out, gaming became big. And all of a sudden was hugely widespread and publicly available and acceptable at a level that just hadn't been really a thing before. You know, even in the SNES era and the Jaguar and then the Saturn, there wasn't really a whole lot of public popularity when it came to gaming. But all of a sudden, gaming was this big thing, in no small part thanks to Doom, actually. And so, you know, a huge audience hungry for things they didn't even know existed, or they didn't have availability for, were like, yes, I want gaming, and we had this game and FF7. And so as a consequence, both games exploded. Just sold like crazy. It's also probably interesting to note that Ocarina of Time codified the modern Zelda format. Couple of dungeons, interaction, more dungeons, final boss. And there's usually some kind of plot twist in the middle. Now, if you think about it, LTTP technically did that first. But LTDP would be more of the initiator, whereas Ocarina is the codifier. Ocarina, Wind Waker, Twilight, and several other games all follow the same general format as this game. In fact, this would be a format they would continue basically until Breath of the Wild, which is the first real one that shifted away from that, not counting a couple of unique exceptions like Four Swords Adventures. And yeah, that's exactly, Char. When you think about Zelda, Ocarina is generally the game that comes to most people's mind immediately. Now I'm going to shush, because I just want to let the intro play once without me talking over it. Notice the usage of actual camera work. I know that sounds so mundane to say nowadays, but the usage of actual camera directing approach was basically brand new. Of course it was. 3D was a new thing. 2D games the sprite games had played around with the ideas of camera work, but hadn't actually done anything really with it yet. So we had things like this. And you'll notice each one of these intros is showing off the camera work and the 3D models. And that is a very deliberate design choice, because it was trying to get the audience to see what they were in for if they played this game. By the way, Taquati, do you mean the thanks ticker? Because it doesn't exist. This is actually our second to last, run that was funded back in the dark ages when I wasn't keeping track of who put money towards it. The other one being the Metroid run. You'll notice also they're emphasizing the use of Epona in the intro. Now, this probably sounds weird, but I'm sure some of you remember, a huge amount of the marketing, at least here in the States, was focused on how much time and effort they put into making the horse animate realistically. It was actually a thing back in the day that horses in video games didn't look at all like horses should look. And this was one of the first big, AAA titles that actually said, okay, we're going to make a horse animate like a horse animates. So, that's why Epona is just all over the intro of the game, in case you're wondering. So, big emphasis on 3D, big emphasis on the horse, big emphasis on the camera work. And of course, like I said, this hit a very hungry gaming market. Because back in the day, there was actually quite a few other systems, but really, this was the beginning of what would become the modern console gaming market. You have your Sony, you have your Nintendo. Later on, Microsoft would enter it, but that's it. The old days of having 15 different consoles had died out effectively completely, pretty much after this. Yes, this was also delayed several times. So, point being, though, if you had a generally at the time, you had a PS1 or you had an N64. I had an N64, consequently. Which is the final story I want to share before we actually hit play. I swear I'll hit play at some point, guys. So, this game came to me, and I was one of those weird people who was kind of disappointed with my N64. Because of something that's been true for me for forever. The strength of a console is and always will be the strength of its library for me, right? The NES had a decent library. The SNES had a frickin' amazing library. The N64 did not. And to this day, the N64 has one of the most limited libraries that I've ever seen. It has some good games on it, don't mistake me, and some really, really great gems. But there's like 10 of them. You know? No, obviously Fallout Bear, we know that Link married... I can't think of her name. The aquatic lady. Anyways. Oh no, sprites could invoke fear within me. Absolutely, Disco. Rudo, thank you. Although, I mean literal fear. Actually, I've mentioned this before. Final Fantasy IV actually scared the crap out of me the first time I played it. Yeah, go ahead, make fun. Anyways. So, my grandmother bought me this for whatever. I think it was Christmas. I'm not actually 100% sure. I was like, well, it's a Zelda game. And as I will talk about when we hit the actual Zelda marathon, I wasn't actually all that into Zelda. Not really. The only Zelda game that I really dug into was LTTP. And a little bit of 2. And I didn't have a Game Boy at that time. So it was just like, alright, you know, it's a Zelda game. Okay, sure. Now, I'll go ahead and admit that I did fall in love with this game. I do think this game has aged surprisingly well, especially the 3DS version. And I did think, like, there's a lot of really good design choices in this game. And it caught me in a way that basically nothing had before, when it comes to the Zelda series, I mean. So, this is technically the beginning of my being a fan of the Zelda franchise, even though I've been playing them since Zelda 1. Make fun if you want. Now, I do want to mention one other thing really quick. I've had some people say that the only dark Zelda game is Majora's Mask, to which I say, do you not pay attention to the Zelda series? The whole Zelda series has always been quite dark. That is nothing new. One moment. I have no idea, Savacom. I'd have to think about it. There we go. Zelda 1 is reasonably dark. Zelda 2 is pretty dark. LTTP is surprisingly dark. The only reason LTTP isn't thought of as dark as it is because it has a very definitively happy ending, where you literally use the Triforce to undo everything. But if not for that, I mean, a lot of people die and worse in LTTP. You remember what happened to the kid who was just, you know, I'm just going to play my flute and not hang out, and then he turns into a tree? You remember that? Anyways. Now, we will, of course, be talking about the timelines, and we will, of course, be talking about the Zelda franchise's love affair with backloaded storytelling. Now, on the off chance you don't know what I'm talking about, front-loaded storytelling is, yes, Beat Nuki, mind-controlled guards who are basically innocents. Anyways, front-loaded storytelling is you sit down and you map out the whole story arc, and then you go and actually make the games in the order. That's front-loaded. Back-loaded is you make a game, and then you think, well, okay, we came up with a few ideas here, so we're going to kind of adapt a few of those ideas and make another game based on those ideas, and then another game, and then another game. That's backloaded. Chronologically, no. There are actually 3 games that occurred before this one, Fallout Bear. If we count Four Swords, which we don't, so I suppose 2, but you get the point. Anyways, so Zelda's franchise is a very big example of backloaded storytelling. Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine is probably one of the best examples of backloaded storytelling I can think of off the top of my head. And I mention that because they came up with Zelda 1, and then they're like, you know what, let's expound upon that. Okay, so we did it. We succeeded at getting the Triforce. Let's move on to Zelda 2. And Zelda 2 was kind of a now what story. And they came up with some concepts of Zelda 2 and said, there's some backstory possibilities here. Why don't we write a backstory for Zelda 1? Hence, A Link to the Past. So it was supposed to go 1, 2, 3. And then they're like, if you remember, at the beginning of Link to the Past, they referenced this ancient war. And they're like, you know what, why don't we set a game during that ancient war? That sounds fascinating. This was the intent behind Ocarina of Time. This was the intent behind this game. This was supposed to be the great conflict that is mentioned in the very beginning of Link to the Past. If you're paying any kind of attention, you'll notice that there's a lot of holes with that. That is one of the byproducts of backloaded storytelling, because they didn't plan this out. Anyways, I want to answer Cozy's question before I move forward. What inspired me to get interested in streaming in video games? I have no idea. I mean, I suppose I could say Dad got me interested in video games because I've been playing video games since I was about 3 as a consequence of him. And then there's... As far as streaming, well, I was already doing YouTube stuff. The end. I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry. I have no idea. I just kind of roamed into streaming and stayed here. Now, in the more... So, okay. Let's go ahead and talk about the timeline problem really quick. So, once upon a time, everyone... There was no official timeline. That was actually released surprisingly recently. Instead, what happened was Zelda 2 directly referenced 1, Link to the Past was directly referenced by 2, and Ocarina of Time was directly referenced by Link to the Past. That's possible, Micromono. So as a consequence, fans kind of put the threads together themselves. Then Majora's Mask came out, and that was an obvious indirect sequel to Ocarina, so it's like, okay. And then Wind Waker came out. And that threw people a little bit. Because Wind Waker was a clear direct sequel to Ocarina, but was incompatible with Link to the Past. Then Twilight Princess came out. Now, as soon as Twilight Princess came out, it was a lot more clear, like, okay. Obviously, there's a timeline split thanks to the end of Ocarina. Cool, we're with that. What this meant is a lot of fans had a lot of different theories and a lot of different, indirect, everyone, a lot of different mentalities and perspectives on exactly how the two timelines set up. But just about everyone thought it was 2 timelines. Just 2. Because why would there be a third timeline? That's ridiculous. Anyways. What should we name Link? Streaming. Easy answer, Jay. No question. I am not naming him my dude. Lorink. Lorink. I will not name him Lonk. No. Some of you have probably watched me play these games before, because once upon a time I used to speedrun this exact game. In fact, that's what I had to delete earlier, was my speedrun saves. And for reasons that I can only call habit, I used to call Link Ganon all the time. I originally did it because it was funny, but then I realized I actually liked the name Ganon better than the name Link, so, I mean, why not, right? So I just kind of kept doing that as a habit. Oh yeah, on the off chance that nobody, in case nobody thinks I know about this, there's actually 2 conflicting stories about why Link is named Link. Story number 1 is that Link was intended to be the link between the various games, and as a consequence was named that. The other possibility is that Link was intended to be the link between the game and the player. Both of these 3DS, Retro Justice, there's a few tricks you can only do in the 3DS version, and it was a lot easier to play for me, so... Anyways, both of these have one cohesive point. Both of these stories have one cohesive point. And that's that they were both placeholder names that they never ended up replacing, which is funny because that's kind of the same backstory for Kirby. Personally, I like the idea that it was Link to the player more, because that makes more sense, considering Zelda 1 was not made with Zelda 2 in mind. But I digress. We'll be boring. We'll call him Link. Sigh. By the way, I need to know how the audio volume is. In the vast, deep forest of Hyrule, Long have I served as the guardian spirit. I am known as the Deku Tree. The children of the forest, the Kokiri, live here with me. Each Kokiri has his or her own guardian fairy. However, there is one boy who does not have a fairy. Because he's a war orphan. Sorry. Notice again they're front-loading the usage of the new camera work, which we'll see again in a second. Navi, Navi, where art thou? Come hither. O Navi the fairy, listen to my words, the words of the Deku Tree. Basically, yes, Moff. Dost thou sense it? The climate of evil descending upon this realm. Malevolent forces even now are mustering to attack our land of Hyrule. For so long the Kokiri Forest, the source of life, has stood as a barrier, deterring outsiders and maintaining the order of the world. But before this tremendous evil, even my power is as nothing. It seems the time has come for the boy without a fairy to begin his journey. The youth whose destiny it is to lead Hyrule to the path of justice and truth. Navi, go now. Find our young friend and guide him to me. So before I move forward, a couple things. First, I know this is so hard to think of with the modern perspective, but you ever have a moment in video gaming that just really blew you away? Like, oh my god, that was so cool! You know, the bucket in Oblivion is one of my favorite stories. Me and my friends all were completely mind blown by this cutscene. Make fun if you must, because at this point it's just basic first-person camera work. But that was mind-blowing, seeing that for the first time. Games didn't do that. Had not done that.
Hello.
Hello, Link. Wake up. The Great Deku Tree wants to talk to you. Link, get up! Oh yeah, by the way, Link to the Past also started the franchise's running gag of Link always starting sleeping. Hey, come on! Can Hyrule's destiny really depend on such a lazy boy? I don't remember, Dakota. Yeah, it's a very efficient intro. Finally woke up. I'm Navi, the fairy. Some people hate me. Lore doesn't hate me, because Lore has a heart. Lore's awesome. Wait. Seriously, though, I've never hated Navi. I know it's the joke. I've never gotten into it, so make fun if you wish. The Great Deku Tree asked me to be your partner from now on. Nice to meet ya. Great Deku Tree has summoned you, so let's get going. Right now. Fee, I hated in gameplay, not in story, if that makes any sense. And we'll be talking about Fee, don't worry. I do plan to bring up Skyward Sword quite a bit. Hi, Link. Wow. A fairy! Finally, a fairy came to you, Link. That's great news. I'm so happy for you. Now you're a true Kokiri, Link. Is that right? The Deku Tree summoned you? It's quite an honor to talk to the Great Deku Tree. I'll wait for you here. Go on, get going. Oh, okay. So I'm going to pretend I'm an idiot and I've never played this game before. Hey, Mr. No Fairy. What's your business with the Great Deku Tree? Without a fairy, you're not even a real man. What? You got a fairy? Say what? The Great Deku Tree actually summoned you? What? Why would he summon you and not the Great Mido? This isn't funny. I don't believe it. You aren't even fully equipped yet. I don't think you're going to help the Great Deku Tree without a sword and a shield. What? You're right, I don't have my equipment ready, but if you want to pass through here, you should at least equip a sword and shield. Sheesh. Tutorials. Basically, barriers to progression in the form of tutorials. There's also a surprisingly large amount of signs, which all say just relatively unimportant stuff, and a lot of people you can talk to, who all introduce you to very basic concepts as if you've never played one of these games before, such as cutting grass to get items, interacting with things, using the Z targeting, oh yeah, interacting with Navi, while we're on the subject. We also see several people interacting with the terrain in the background, in the initial intro. We also get a tiny little bit of backstory here. I just want you to know, by the way, guys, that I am using every ounce of my willpower to not do this. Anyways. Oh, a fairy finally came. Now you have a lot to learn. You should try the Forest Training Center. This also teaches you how to pick up stuff and throw stuff. We also get a little bit of backstory on Mido. He's basically the... I'd call him the village elder, but it's more accurate to say that he is the alpha of this particular group. He's also kind of a bully. Now, that sounds like a weird thing to point out, but I only point that out because, again, this game was very deliberately designed to be playable by people who were just getting into gaming in general, or were just getting into the Zelda franchise in specific. So, I don't know, if I was going to go really fast strats, I'd do this. Although it's harder to do on the 3DS than on the N64. Anyways. So, the idea of your main obstacle is... I point this out. Your initial obstacle in this game is the local bully. How many of you do not have some kind of experience with bullying, with bullies in your life? Again, only pointing out the minor nature of it because it's not only a very low-scale threat, but it's an extremely common one. Sorry, I'm rolling. Sorry. Yeah. I've told you plenty of stories about my own experiences with bullies. So we have something very, very, very relatable. And very, very, very low tier. This is also when we learn about first-person mode, which is completely different than the 3DS version. Behold the face of terror! So what I'm doing, you could make fun of me for this. I'm literally... So normally my right thumb sits on the 3 buttons here, and just kind of rests on the A button. So I'm literally... I know you can't quite tell. I'm literally pulling my thumb off the buttons and putting it down here to prevent myself from rolling. Whatever it takes. God, I haven't been in here so long. So this was a tutorial room. Completely optional. Just explains a lot of the base mechanics and interface features. See? Also explaining how to save your game, and just all sorts of little stuff like that. Now, I've heard some people argue in one direction or the other on this one. Personally, though, I actually rather like how this game does it. I know, right, Dakota? Because, look, I've sped-run this game. I've told you. What do you want from me? I'm trying so hard to fight my instincts on this. Anyways. Because the idea here is that a lot of this tutorial... There's a decent chunk of tutorial in this area. But the overwhelming majority of it is actually optional. As anyone who has played through this game multiple times, or sped-run this game, can tell you, all you really need to do is grab a few rupees, which is relatively easy and quick to do, go grab the sword, and then progress to the first dungeon. Bam, bam, bam. There is, as I'm trying to show off here, there's quite a bit of other little things here, like explaining how to cut the grass with the sword, even though the other guy also mentioned that further up. We've also got thrust the attack signs. This is also teaching you how you have multiple types of attacks, which will be relevant later on in the game. He will also teach us how to jump sideways, or to backflip, or to roll attack. He also does the jump attack. Basically, all the ways that the L button changes our basic movement options. Because they didn't really know how to do 3D at this point in time. Which I mention because, I mean, it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but this is kind of more pseudo 3D than it is full 3D. We don't even have actual camera control. If you see me keep doing that, it's kind of a habit, first of all. This teaches, oh my god, this is how we use viewpoint targeting, so we can figure out how to walk sideways and to see when the rock's coming, see? But yeah, a lot of this was experimental, so they were still trying to figure it out. So, for good and for bad, Ocarina of Time is fully a context-sensitive game. I have no camera control. Actually, I think I do. Nope, I don't. I have no real camera control, and I have no real, like, I don't have a jump button. I have the ability to use context-sensitive buttons in order to kind of trick my way into the equivalent of camera control, or jumping, or rolling, or dodging, or whatever. One moment. So. Yes, and I cannot climb mountains. That will not happen until later. Now, as mentioned earlier, you have swing, you have downward swing, and you have stab swing. Now, the difference between those three things is actually pretty minor in this game. In fact, it only really matters for like 3 enemies in the entire game. Unless you're doing an infinite sword glitch or something like that. But it's worth noting that they had that idea, which would then be much further expanded in both of the games we're going to be playing. So we can do things like chop it down, chop it sideways, or chop it straight. And we can see all 3 of those for that. Yep, Shadow Link is one of them. The other one is the frickin', I forget what they're called, but it's the plant chomper things we're about to be seeing in just a second here. Ah, yes, so I mentioned context sensitive. So if you go over an edge too slowly, you don't actually jump, you hang. You have to go over it at full speed in order to jump. You can, of course, also roll into it to jump. Like this. Which is my usual go-to nowadays. So, forgive me for yammering on about game design. I know people don't think I care about game design just because I don't have... Maybe I should call myself Lore Game Design Runner. That'd make it more clear. I do think a gameplay negative is justified here, sadly. So we're going to go ahead and add that. Because this game is the worst game ever made. No, I actually agree with Takoida's point earlier. He probably thought I didn't notice it, but I do actually agree with him. It is for the fact that there's a voice clip on everything. There's simply too many parts of this game. Like, the reason I'm trying so hard not to Zelda roll all over the place is this. Have I made my point? This is not good game design. That being said, I'm going to go and give 2 gameplay positives. Excuse me. Now. Sorry. I need to give a story positive, too. Sorry, just realized. Well, he only has about 4 or 5, I think. I know there's 3 for the basic role. And I think he's got a couple others for the other things. And then he's got like, yeah! And I think that's it. Oh, we'll talk about Hippora Gibora, and he will be a negative to gameplay. Guaranteed. It's one of the only negatives I had in mind before I even picked this game up. No, Pep Dog, I have no interest in it personally. I should start... Let's start making this a drinking game. Can we do that? I've been asked that question so many times this week. So, every time someone asks about WoW Classic, take a drink. Alright. So... No shame intended, Pep Dog. It's just people keep asking it. That's exactly, Jay. This way I'll make sure I'll keep hydrated, which is very important. It's an important health thing. Basically, the overwhelming majority of the tutorialization here is non-mandatory, is something you can go seek out for yourself, or something that's just present in the level design. This, I think, is one of the biggest reasons why... How do I phrase this? I mentioned how... Hang on, I don't want to hear that anymore. I mentioned how Aonuma didn't really take over until Majora's. And I mentioned that because Miyamoto's fingerprints are all over this game, in my opinion. And this is one of the most obvious ways, because Miyamoto has always been a really big champion of tutorialization in level design. And this place, and we'll talk about this when we get to the first dungeon as well, are really big on tutorializing through level design, rather than by having someone drop down and say, "Did you know?" Now, that being said, I know they do actually tutorialize in text later, and we'll talk about that when we get there, but I'll get there. I'll get there. So the story positive... Now, the story positive, this is actually cheating a little bit, because this is technically a story positive that normally wouldn't be codified till later. But one of the things they do quite a bit, and you'll especially see this once we become an adult, spoilers, is they use the camera for cutscenes in a specific way to emphasize how small you are and how much bigger and more terrifying everything else is as when you're a kid. And then they do basically the exact opposite when you're an adult. In short, they actually try to use the camera as a storytelling tool, which is good storytelling cinematography. So that's the plus to story there. And I don't remember what the other gameplay plus I was about to give out was. Oh, right, no. So this is also technically a cheat of a gameplay plus. Even though we just complained about the hat. That being said, this game, no Berserkero. This game is one of the best sound designed games ever. And I mean that with total sincerity. Someone mentioned this in chat earlier, but this is something that bears repeating. Blind people have beaten this game because of sound design. People have speedrun this game with blindfolds on because of sound design. This is yeah, no, I'm not joking. You can look this up. This has been true for years at this point, actually. So, the overall sound design of this game is very, very good. in general, just across the board, other than the repeated on Link himself. Although you could argue that that's useful as well, because it tells you when an action happens. So... So I think that's everything for the moment. Yep, that's everything for the moment. Okay. I'll try to demonstrate some of the specific ways in which the sound design is excellent as we go through it. What's our rupee count? We need a few more rupees. I got that one, I got that one. I think actually we're good. No, I need 3 more. There we go. We're good. Probably Micromano. Yeah, I was actually present live during the first GDQ speedrun of this game, blindfolded, which was just astonishing. So we'll go and grab that. They weren't Micromano. They had to play the game without dialogue text. I did notice that, actually, Zalok. And so did quite a few people, too, because it's just such a noteworthy element of how the game is presented. Oh, you have a Deku Shield. What's that? Is that the Kokiri sword? Ah, good grief. Well, even with all that stuff, a wimp is still a wimp, huh? I, the great Mido, will never accept you as one of us. Shoot, how'd you get to be the favorite of Saria and the Great Deku Tree, huh? Well, thank you, Brazen Bell. I hope you've been enjoying yourself. No, Tesla effect. I have no practice in it. I can blindfold a little bit of Punch-Out because I've practiced it. But not this one. And Fallout Bear... So, yes, is the simplest way to say that. All the way back in 2012, I believe, was the first marathon blindfold run. Let's get a couple more. Just in case. We'll be safe. And we're done. Great Deku Tree, I'm back! Oh, Navi, thou hast returned. Link, welcome. Listen carefully to what I, the Deku Tree, am about to tell thee. Thy slumber these past moons must have been restless, and full... Oh, yeah, sorry. Gameplay negative. Sorry. Almost forgot. But it should be noted. Unskippable cutscenes. As the servants of evil gain strength, a vile climate pervades the land and causes nightmares to those sensitive to it. Verily, thou hast felt it. Link, the time has come to test thy courage. I have been cursed. I need thee to break the curse with thy wisdom and courage. But not my power? So I got this. So, tutorial dungeon. And it really is the tutorial dungeon, but I don't mean that in a bad way. No, the owl is a whole separate negative. So the very first enemy we see is an enemy which teaches us about the whole different types of attacks thing. Which is funny, because as I mentioned, it only really matters for a handful of enemies in the entire game. Notice also that quite a few of the initial enemies have basically a cycle nature to them. So, for example, that one, even if it hits you, basically then goes into a self-stun state. So where it will not hit you again for several seconds. This is actually a specific improvement over Link to the Past. Anyone who's played Link to the Past knows that enemies in that game, once they hit you, they just keep trying to hit you, right? I mean, how many times have you been like, there's a guard here, and you're here, and the guard's like, and it just keeps constantly following you. Even as your iframes are defending you, he's just sticking right on you, and you're actually having trouble getting out of his hitbox, right? Or hurtbox, excuse me. They specifically made a point to try and avoid that in Ocarina. Now, that does make the game easier, unfortunately or otherwise, but it is also arguably better design. Now, I mentioned there's a few deliberate things here, like that one. There's 3 of those, I think, in this dungeon, which is the mandatory tutorial-y nature of it. You'll notice how there is a very deliberate flow here, by the way. The first thing we find out is there's a bunch of enemies and nowhere to progress other than the part of the wall that looks a little different. Now, in fairness, to be completely blunt, on a bad TV, with back in the day, the difference in that wall texture was not super coherent. So I will go ahead and admit that I actually had a little bit of trouble finding this chunk of wall the first time playing. However, to get back to the good game design and the tutorialization through level design, so we see this wall. First thing we find out if we get near is we can climb it. Then we immediately see another chunk of wall here, but there's a bunch of spiders on it. So if on the off chance we actually try to start climbing this, okay, it is, in fairness, it is actually possible to climb up here if you're good. But the idea is they're supposed to knock you off. You're not supposed to be able to climb up here without knocking out the spiders. There we go. So, the camera, quite naturally, leans itself this way. The only way you can really go. This leads us to our second of the mandatory tutorial cutscene things. So then there's that little tidbit. Now, funnily enough, I've heard some people say that that's actually unfair game design, because there's nothing really indicating that you can do that, per se. However, this is still a bit of tutorialization in game design. They could have had a giant text thing pop up and say, "Did you know that you can block by holding this button here and this button here?" Instead, what they do is they have a single enemy who withdraws anytime you get close to him, pops up, and shoots a ranged element at you anytime you're at distance. There's nothing else in the room. There's nothing else to do. You are stuck here until you figure out how to deal with that. And if you happen to target it and hit the Navi button, she will tell you you can block there. And if you remember, they already told us twice how to actually use Navi in combat as a way to basically get a little hint on the enemy. So, it doesn't, I don't know about you guys, but this did not take a long time to figure out. This is also important because using the shield is pretty relevant through almost the entire game. So we do actually need that kind of tutorialization. And again, tutorialization in level design. Now, someone asked, is this the first game to have the jingle for the chests? No, that would actually be Zelda LTTP. Now, it tells us how to use that and gives us full ammo, both important points. Give me one moment here, I'll drag this here. I'm going to need... Come on. There we go. I'm going to need this later, so we'll drag that out there. So now, the camera automatically turns around after you capture it, and the first thing you see is a green icon, which, remember, we've already seen. They've already introduced to us the concept that Navi can interact with something. So we hit that, and Navi's like, what's she saying? And say, look, something's hanging up there. Looks like an old ladder. Now, I actually knew a friend of mine who was stuck in this room a little while, because he kept trying to talk to it. Like, what am I supposed to do here? But, yeah. The game does go quite out of its way to introduce you to the idea of using the slingshot. And, of course, both methods of using the slingshot. One, which is the lock-on shot, which I just showed, and two is just doing it live, like this. Forgive me for saying all this crap, but I really dig the level design and the gameplay mechanics that really went into some of these earlier games. I feel like we take for granted a lot of things that were... that a lot of people put a lot of thought into, basically. Oh, let's go and grab that really quick. Yeah, like camera work. Nowadays, camera work is almost mandatory for a lot of games. Even sprite-based games. Now, we don't actually have to do this. But, you know, why not, right? Whoops. Well, there's some discolored patches here. There's a chest. I can see that. There's an enemy which... Oh, yeah, by the way, the enemies drop different items depending on how you kill them, which is a neat little side thing. So if we hit this... Aha! Now, again, this is kind of a duh, especially for any long-time video game player or Zelda player in particular. No, Baron. But introducing us to the idea of, you know, a button that changes the terrain was something that pretty much needed to be happening. I've actually already answered that question, Gum Gum, but put simplistically, yes and no. This is also our first Gold Skulltula. Now, I just want to point out, so every other enemy, including these nightmarish things, attacks us or interacts with us or tries to do something with us. Every single one of them is active in some way. So the Gold Skulltulas are the very first and one of the only enemies in the entire game that is completely passive. You'll notice there's also a specific dingle for getting it, and a text message, which happens every friggin' time. In short, this is something important. Keep it in mind for later. This also... Whoops. That's my bad. This also teaches us how to light torches. No, Tesla. The ones in Twilight get to me a lot more. Also, as much as I don't like the Skulltulas, they do help to tutorialize on the very concept of basically waiting for the enemy to show their weakness. Now, there's been a lot of arguments over the years as to whether what is effectively delayed game design is a good thing or a bad thing. But Strimmer Rage is definitely a good thing, regardless of all. I think we can all agree on that one. But it's worth noting that a lot of enemies in Ocarina follow the wait for their vulnerability type of mentality. Like the Wolfos is a perfect example. You can kill a Wolfos before it does its big attack, but you're not supposed to. You're supposed to wait it to be like, and then it does its second attack and it actually spins. Whoops, let's not drag the cable there. It spins around in the process, completely opening it up for attack. The Stalfos do that. The Skulltulas do that. Several of the Moblins do that. A huge amount of enemies in this game do that approach of exactly how they are supposed to be combated. So they use the Skulltulas here very early on to try and tutorialize this concept. Once again, thank you very much, Strimmer Rage. Much appreciate the sub, as always, sir. Thank you so much. If you happen to know where you want to put that, that'll be awesome. If you don't, then there will be stabbings. Now, what's interesting here, this is where I got stuck in this dungeon, and I'll admit it. It's funny because the reason I got stuck was I didn't really think in terms of real life, in which case this would have been obvious immediately. I was thinking in terms of a video game, which, as anyone will tell you, is a form of limited logic, because there's only so much you can do in a video game. Oops. I completely screwed that up. There we go. Yeah, pits are bad, exactly, so it was just kind of like, there we go. What do I do? So I got stuck there quite a while. I'll admit that. You'll notice, by the way, this first dungeon is actually quite generous with regards to hearts and general recovery options. You'll notice also, in almost every case, we are fighting maybe one thing at a time. Later on in the dungeon, we will have the astonishing difficulty of fighting two things at once. They do a lot of effort, in short, to make sure that you are not thrown off the deep end in this first dungeon. It really is a tutorial dungeon. And yeah, even the plants regrow in this dungeon, which is something that will not happen later on. Must not roll. So we got another one of these. By this point, we basically had to have done this, so he tells us 23 is number 1. Which, I don't know why, has been stuck in my head ever since. Seriously, it's like I have so many video game quotes in my head. But 23 is number 1 has just been stuck there for years. It's not even a particularly catchy quote. I don't know. Anyways. So, this is probably one of the more relevant and, again, the final big text thing there. The mandatory text thing. You can't really skip that text message. It's to explain the concept of diving, because even though you can have dived before this, there's nothing really that indicates you can or how it works exactly. So instead, they, honestly, rightly, decided to go ahead and implement a, here you go, this is how diving works text box, so that you could go and hit that button. And again, this is a very simple and very, leisurely puzzle. The time, you notice it has tons and tons of time on it. So, not exactly... oh yeah, sorry. So this is what happens if you hit them before they're vulnerable. Now you notice they don't even go vulnerable again after hitting them. It's only if you are patient that they actually hit their vuln state. Sorry, I wanted to show that off really quick. Oh, I'm sorry, I guess there's a fourth one. I forgot about this one. So this is explaining how to use blocks. So now we know how to block, we know how to dive, we know how to move things, we know how to jump, we know how to attack. You get the general idea here, of course, and forgive me for being verbose in getting across my point. But as I mentioned earlier, the entire point here is that they are trying to teach us all the concepts of the game that we will end up needing by the end. There are, of course, other concepts we will learn later on, but most of those will be Zelda'd into our consciousness. I suppose I should explain what that means. So, yeah, true enough. Quake 1, we'd spend a lot of time explaining the excellence of the level design of Quake 1, because holy crap. They really did a lot right with that game. My goodness. I'll freely admit that. Especially those first few stages. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off topic. So that's one of the first and only times we fight multiple enemies in this entire dungeon. And they are very low-threat enemies who take a long time to attack and have a big visual indicator of when they're going to attack. Okay. What was I about to talk about? Zelda'ing. So, a format used by virtually every Zelda game is you enter a dungeon, and you can only do about half of it. Exact figures vary. And once you have done about half of it, you will be able to, you'll get an item. That item will then enable you to do the other half. This is pretty much the Zelda standard. And this is true for an inordinate number of Zelda games. Link Between Worlds was actually one of the only exceptions to this. And it was actually considered a very unique thing for being an exception to that exact formula. Oh yeah, as an aside, even though this is kind of the bog standard minimap, can I just say I actually really like the minimap as it's presented in the 3DS version? It shows you where you are. That's the yellow triangle. You can see the lower left there. Shows you where you're facing, shows you where you came from, and shows you the room you're in. Now you do actually have the... you have to have the map and the compass to get the full access to all of that. Hope to see you later, Fuzzy Duck. Nevertheless, I do think the minimap and its usage is actually a good implementation in this game, personally. It helps you to keep track of what you're doing and where you've been pretty well, IMO. So, this is another thing that Zelda dungeons do a lot of. Circular design. I think I've only ever really talked about this when it came to Skyrim before. But the idea is you go through the dungeon, and then when you have concluded most of the puzzles, you end up basically where you started. Now, this has a lot of options, or this has a lot of benefits. First of all, it avoids the hallway problem, as Maudiev just pointed out. Second, it means that... Yeah, Dark Souls 1's another good example of that. Second is it means that just by doing the dungeon, you kind of naturally unlock shortcuts. Simply by having done this, if I happen to die now, I am now at this point, rather than at the previous point I would have been, because it'll keep certain states with regards to what you've already done in the dungeon. And of course, the final point is it also means that if you know what you're doing, you can just blaze through these things. Which is one of the reasons I think why Zelda games are so popular for speedrunning. Now, 23 is number 1. I suck at this. A little too slow there. Funnily enough, there is no timer on this. You could take infinite time if you really wanted to. The only thing that matters is if you get it in the right order. And then, he tells you a little bit of the boss strategy about what you're about to fight. Now, before we move on to our first boss, I do want to answer Jay's question. I am going to try to point out variances between the core game as well as the 3DS remake. Put simply, though, there's really only 2 things that they changed with the 3DS remake. It's barely even a remake. It's more like a very good port, I would say, or a remaster. One is obvious, the graphics, which are noticeably different. If you ever see a side-by-side, the difference is stark. But the second and substantially more important thing is the interface. So this is a lot smoother than the N64 control stick. It gives you a lot more control over precisely how and where you're aiming, despite being the 3DS analog, which kind of sucks in general. So this right here is all I needed to start enjoying this game again. It's why I don't want to play the N64 version again. But it also did something, and I know you can't see it, and I'd have to reboot the entire 3DS to showcase it, so just do me a favor and take my word on it. It completely overhauled the menu. So, on the menu down below, there is exactly, Maudie, that's a good way to put that. Also, lol. There's a map which shows all sorts of stuff. It shows chests, it shows where you are, it shows where enemies are, it shows your current hearts, you have what weapon you have equipped. You have 4 slots that you can hotkey. Actually, technically, well, yeah, 4 slots. 2 of them are the obvious Y button and X button. But there's also 2 that are just for the touchpad, so you can just reach over and pat them. And they're in each of the corners of the 3DS. So while handling it normally, it's actually very easy and relatively intuitive to tap each of these just with your thumb really quick, as if they were another button. Now... there's also, of course, the gear menu, which is pretty much the same thing. The item, the map here, which is exactly what I just mentioned. The item menu, which is also pretty much exactly what I just mentioned. But this all means that the game controls very smoothly and very intuitively. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the interface itself deserves a positive because of how much it serves to... Basically, it's a lot of hotkey design. You have access to 5 tools off the just immediately at the touch of your hands, in addition to sword and shield. It also has a good map and a good item and blah blah blah. It also was, so what's funny is this thing specifically for the 3DS version was in part designed specifically to solve the boots problem in the original, which the only way in the original to change between boots, you couldn't hotkey them. You had to do this and then this and then this in order to change boots in the original. And that's not a big deal, but when you have to do it frequently, which multiple dungeons require of you, it's a damned pain, and it makes them far more irritating than they really should be. So this is just a good example of good interface design as opposed to bad interface design. Am I updating the wrong pluses? I think I am. There we go. Here's the pluses. Oh yeah, pausing also took a bit. Did I already add the plus? I did. Okay, so I should mention Ocarina of Time 3. That just occurred to me. 3D. Yeah, let's make sure it's very clear that I'm reviewing the 3DS version here. just put that there. So, another plus. 15 pluses to gameplay. My Link's personality has always been what I would go ahead and call very boring. But there's something very enjoyable about playing the stoic. If you really think about the Zelda franchise, especially the 3D ones and the core trilogy we'll be playing, Link goes through a lot of crap. All three of these Links, I should say, go through a lot of crap. And he just kind of takes it in stride for the most part. I mean, he freaks out every now and again, and he's overwhelmed every now and again, but for the most part, he is afraid and then keeps going. Which is, by the way, the definition of courage. So I'm sure that's done on purpose, but it's still, there's something enjoyable about playing someone who is that stoic, who is just unyielding in the way they move forward. Now I know what you're thinking, what's the fourth positive? I feel like I've been talking this fourth positive up quite a bit. This is what I should just start calling this the Miyamoto standard, because this is going to come up in future games as well. Tutorialization and level design. Whoops. Unfortunately, no, Jay. I have since had to remove every setting from the extant in order to be able to, you know, someday market it. Originally, yes, though. Nowadays, I'm just gonna kind of move forward with the what do we call it? The NCU. NCU. So I'm not going to get a quick kill here, because I want to show off the boss a little bit. So you're trapped. Nothing to do. And first boss. Pretty much, Zaluk. Now this is an extremely easy boss. But you'll notice how they actually bothered to make her strangely intimidating. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna stop. For the first major encounter you fight. I actually knew a couple of kids, I'll go down myself here, who when we first saw this back in the day were just like, oh my god! Hold up. I want to show off her second phase. Like, there's just this giant, it's not even actually a spider, it's just this thing. And listen to the sound effects of it. Now, she has this thing where she gets these red eyes. That's when you can hit her with the item of the dungeon. Now, this is actually good design for several reasons. The most obvious of which being it teaches you, the player, that the item you get in a dungeon is to be used on the boss of a dungeon. This is true in, I think, every single dungeon in this game. I could be wrong about that, but it's true in almost every case, at least. Yeah, that's not really copy wrong, Jay. That's just reality. Now, I showed off her second phase there because, like I said, she's a very forgiving boss. There's things around the dungeon that you can take out, which give you health or items, and she drops an infinite amount of adds, which you can also kill, to give you healing and items. In short, every effort is made to make sure that as long as you're constantly trying to...
Your dedication will be rewarded.
Whoa, it does not like that. Holy crap, Vigilant. Did you see that? As long as you're paying any kind of attention and taking out all the side stuff, like this, to get across my point a little bit, you're full up. It's actually pretty hard to die to this boss if you have any kind of idea what you're doing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go see what Vigilant just donated. Ah. He says, I hate everything in the universe. Oh, I don't remember, Vigilant. That was a long time ago. And yeah, the vampire path is a little too cannibalistic for me, a little too gross in Skyrim. I agree with you on that. Either way, thank you very, very much, Vigilant. Much appreciate the donation, as always. It's good to see you again. Which one was that from? Jedi Academy. So, we've talked a lot about gameplay. We've barely talked about story. Believe it or not, there is a story focus in this game. How many of you have seen a video by someone who I will not be naming, who says that this game sucks because it has too much story focus? I think I've made my point clear over the years that I consider good story to always be a plus. Yeah, I'm not going to mention anything here. Anyways, I try to discuss things. I try to be understanding and tolerant and considerate and, halfway and blah, blah, blah. But I don't even know where to begin with that. Good story, emphasis, is basically, could be described as the word context. It's why you're doing what you're doing. And the argument that was being made was you don't need a reason to go up a hill. There's a hill. That's the only reason you need. I don't work that way. I know some people do. I think, probably. But instead, I see a hill and I'm like, okay. And then I look around for something to do. So I kind of prefer some kind of context or reason to go exploring or go to do things. Now, that being stated, true enough, Follow Bear. That being stated, I do have to say that I find it amusing that that the person in question, who I'm not going to say anything about, specifically mentioned LTTP as doing this better, because LTTP also had a story focused. In fact, it was the first Zelda with a story focus, which also had context for why you were doing things. Anyways, moving on. And yeah, I'm with you on that, by the way. The Brazen Bell, sorry. Anyways, so, speaking of story focus, well done, Link. Thou hast verily demonstrated thy courage. I knew that thou wouldst be able to carry out my wishes. Now I have yet more to tell thee. Wouldst thou listen? No. Yeah, no, there's a lot of but thou must in this game. Now listen carefully. A wicked man of the desert cast this dreadful curse on me. So yeah, backstory. Oh, keys are a total pain in the arse. In like any of these games. The evil man ceaselessly uses his vile sorcerous powers in search of the sacred realm that is connected to Hyrule. For it is in that sacred realm that one will find the divine relic, the Triforce, which contains the essence of the gods. So, brief creation mythos. Before time began, before spirits and life existed. By the way, this isn't quite accurate. 3 golden goddesses descended upon the chaos that was Hyrule. We'll cover this in detail. I want to talk through it, because I can't pause this. Din, goddess of power. Naryu, goddess of wisdom. And Furor, goddess of courage. Xenoblade, Terra. Din, excuse me, with her strong flaming arms cultivated the land and created the red earth. Neryu poured her wisdom into the earth and gave spirit of law to the world. And, of course, Furore, with her rich soul, produced all life forms which would uphold the law. In this case, it's fairies because, look, we got a sprite limit, okay? The three goddesses, their labors completed, departed for the heavens. And golden sacred triangles remained at the point where the goddesses left the world. Since then, the sacred triangles have become the basis of our world's providence. And the resting place of the triangles became the sacred realm. Yeah, the three goddesses are actually kind of horrible. In that they're not evil so much as they are really negligent. I've talked about this a lot, especially in my ruminations of these. They're like the worst kind of parents. They're the parents who will give their kid $5 in a mall and then go home. That's the best way I can describe the three goddesses. They are not cool. Hylia, and who may or may also be the time goddess, we'll talk about that later, are a lot more caring about specific events and actually bother to try and give a damn. But anyways, thou must never allow the desert man in black armor to lay his hands on the sacred Triforce. Thou must never suffer that man with his evil heart to enter the sacred realm of legend. That evil man who hath cast the death curse upon me and sapped my power. Because of that curse, my end is nigh. Though, through your valiant efforts... No, he does say, though. Though your valiant efforts to break the curse were successful, I was doomed before you started. Yes, I will pass away soon, but do not grieve for me. I have been able to tell you of these important matters. This is Hyrule's final hope. Link, go now to Hyrule Castle. There thou wilt surely meet the Princess of Destiny. Take this stone to Mother Mircette. That's Mother Mircette wanted so badly that she cast the curse upon me. Why'd you gotta curse the Deku Tree? God. You got the Kokiri's Emerald! Woo! Future depends upon thee, Link. Thou art courageous. Shouldst thou ever lose thy way, seek a vision of the past from the Sheikah Stone. Navi, I entreat thee, Navi. Goodbye. And then the Deku Tree frickin' dies. Hang on, Alex. That's a complicated question. I want to address that in full. Goodbye, great Deku Tree. This is great. Link just wanders off, but because he's never really interacted with the Deku Tree. It's Navi who hangs around a minute and has that moment of, before coming back. Little touches like that. I'm going to say this as bluntly as I can, and this is going to sound pretty elitist. Please forgive me. Little touches like that are what the PS2 era kind of forgot. There's too many times where someone would say, I just can barely believe the Deku Tree is gone. I don't even know what to think now. I guess the best thing I can do is move on. Instead, a PS1 era game will have the fairy turn around, hesitate, and then hesitantly leave. Same information is conveyed. Just, yeah. Pretty much the definition of showing versus telling. Now I want to get to the overworld. So we're going to talk about the goddesses and the creation myth as soon as we get to the overworld, okay? Hey, Link, what did you do? The great Deku Tree, did he die? How could you let a thing like that happen? It's all your fault. Definitely a kid's game. E for everyone. I'm not sure. Did the ESRB... I think the ESRB existed at this point. I think so. Yeah, Mortal Kombat was basically the beginning of that. I'm pretty sure that was before this, so... Oh, you're leaving. I knew you'd leave the forest someday, Link. Because you're different from me and my friends. That's okay. We'll be friends forever, won't we? Oh, God. Oh, feels. Sorry. Soraya is a character that is... tragic. I think that's the simplest way to put it. Poor, poor Soraya. Especially if you believe in the theory that she dies. Which I do, by the way. I want you to have this Ocarina. Oh yeah, quick aside. For the longest time, I didn't know how to pronounce this word. In fact, even during the ruminations of this game, I called it Ocarina, or Ocarina, or... Oh god, I can't remember what the correct pronunciation is all of a sudden. Hang on, hang on. Let's look this up real quick. Hang on. Hang on, hang on.
Ocarina.
Ocarina is apparently correct. Jesus Christ. I still have trouble with this word. Anyways, I want you to have this Ocarina. Please take good care of it. Suggestive themes. Wow. So that gets a permanent slot on the menu, which is important because it's kind of... It didn't in the original. The original is just another item you could hotkey. The fact that it gets a permanent hotkey on the 3DS version is actually, in my opinion, a good thing, if for no other reason because it emphasizes how often you're going to frickin' use the damn thing. The Ocarina is probably the second most used item in this entire game, only behind the sword. When you play my Ocarina, I hope you will think of me and come back to the forest and visit. Notice how Link doesn't know how to deal with that, hesitates, and then turns and runs. Once again, showing, not telling, and she just watches him go. That scene kinda hurts, you know? Then, to change the tone, because you always want to feel... Because we just had, like, 2 downer scenes in a row. We have this big uplifting thing, and notice the camera goes out of its way to showcase the scope of this place. Now, again, nowadays this is a joke, right? But the sheer size of Hyrule Field was mind-blowing at the time. Now, in the interest of fairness, it's kind of empty. This is arguably bad design. In fact, it is substantially empty compared to other later sections of even Zelda games, or other open-world games, which would do this concept a lot better. The idea here, though, and there's actually a specific reason for this, the reason the Hyrule Field is so empty is because it kind of had to be. Aw, crap, I shouldn't have stopped to talk. I've just screwed it up, didn't I? Yeah, I've screwed up. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to chill for a minute. Yeah, lack of things to do hurt this game. Fortunately, fast travel has been a standard of the Zelda series since LTTP. Seriously. So, getting around isn't a huge hassle once you start getting the waypoints, basically. Now, I said I'd talk about the goddesses and whatnot, and I will. So I've actually got the book right here in front of me. This is... Alright, so... The simplest way to explain this is there's 5 goddesses in this setting. Yeah, 5. Whatever. Now, we'll talk about the 4 for right now, because the 5th is the one that is the least covered so far. And the 5th might be the 4th. As I just mentioned, it's the least covered. The 3 are the obvious. You just saw them. Din, Neryu, and Furore. It's worth noting that it is within relative possibility that those goddesses never existed. I know that sounds like a strange thing to mention since everyone talks about them, but of the 5, the ones that are the least characterized are the 3, the core 3 of the Triforce. I'll even read here. Well, actually, I won't read the whole thing because this is a pretty big chunk. But the 3 goddesses in this book have about a paragraph to them, total, for all 3. Hylia, by contrast, has closer to 5 paragraphs. And I point that out because it helps to emphasize how much the 3 goddesses, as weird as this may sound, don't actually matter for the overall story. They emphasized the 3 core aspects of what was considered to be creation: courage, power, wisdom, which is also emphasized by wind, water, and fire, respectively. So, I don't think I've ever heard it pronounced professionally, Tesla, but I have heard Hylia, I've heard Hylia, and I have heard Hylia, and I think Hylia is the other one, or Hylia, there we go, that's the other one. There are quite a few, in short. Anyways, the point is, the 3 goddesses, I mentioned my parallel earlier of the parent that gives their kid $5 and leaves them at the mall alone. That is kind of the 3 goddesses, assuming they existed at all, which we could probably assume, but they are effectively irrelevant for the overall structure of the story, other than the fact that they made the world and made the Triforce. Now, the Triforce, so almost all of the magic in Zelda is what you'd call traditional, Final Fantasy style magic. You have a spell, the spell has a specific effect. Spells require mana. Mana is rejuvenated over time, or through specific magical quantities, or being in a magical area, or whatever, right? All of that stuff is pretty much normal. The one big exception to that is the Triforce itself, which is a very strong aspect of rules magic, as I like to call it. Now, rules magic, I should probably save, it just occurred to me. I haven't yet. There we go. Rules magic, just in case something goes wrong there. Rules magic is exactly what it sounds like, but in the off chance you've never heard me talk about that, rules magic is basically like programming for the setting. So, if I am attacked by an iron sword, then that will destroy my power source, or God, all of a sudden I'm struggling to come up with examples of rules magic. Help me out, guys. Because I like to use examples, and I just cannot think of any examples for some friggin' reason. Rules magic is when you program reality rather than cast a spell. And rules magic almost always is stronger than other types of magic. Rules magic also tends to have the byproduct of being the kind of thing you're supposed to think your way through. The Triforce itself is rules magic. You interact with the Triforce, you gain a wish. Now, that only works if you have the entire Triforce, all 3 pieces. And it basically gives you, in D&D terms, a unrestricted or unlimited wish. It gives you 1 unlimited wish. Boom. This enables me to wish for whatever. It is worth noting, however, that the specifics of how that wish come to be depend on specific circumstances. So it's not anything you want. It's kind of more like, depending on who you are, determines how well that wish is reflected. Now, this is something that will come up much more in LTTP, but funny story, despite being the object of desire for a huge number of characters across almost every Zelda game, very rarely does anyone directly interact with the Triforce. It happened in Wind Waker, or, well, what happened in Wind Waker? Happened in LTTP, and I'm sure it happened a few other times. Let's talk about the 4th goddess. I'm going to keep calling her Hylia, because I've been saying that without really meaning to. So, Hylia, or Hylia, or Helia, or however the hell you want to pronounce it. Just stab me if you're tired of it. I don't care at this point. Hylia is the one who was put in charge of the world. because Hylia was the one that the three goddesses left behind to be like, hey, look, we're going to pick up some tacos, and we might need to be back for a few millennia. So could you go ahead and just deal with things for us? Thanks. And then they peaced out. Hylia, it's worth noting, though she is imbued with the power of wisdom specifically, doesn't actually have direct power over the Triforce, or really anything. Despite being a so-called goddess, she is actually pretty low tier. Now this is actually specifically relevant. No, Navi. Here, I'll go ahead. There. Now this is relevant because Hylia was left to take care of a world basically on her own devices. Now, for reasons that are never actually described, and this is actually brought up here, and I want to read this specific section. Page 98. There's these creatures called demons. Demons born from the source of all evil and monsters under the influence of dark magic sow turmoil and destruction to Hyrule and its parallel worlds. It describes it a little bit more, but the long and the short of it is we don't know what demons are. They're evil. Demons are portrayed as universally evil creatures. We don't know what they are, or why they are, or where they came from, or anything whatsoever. They just kind of are. It's probably one of the more typical mythos aspects of the Zelda franchise, and the fact that they just kind of are. Now, Demise actually came from the Earth. In fact, under the Earth, there was a great fissure that erupted in the Earth, and Demise actually came out from a giant, with a giant army of demons at its head. It's worth noting that this is more the Japanese definition of demons than, say, the Diablo definition of demons. But either way, there's all sorts of creatures that qualify as demons in this franchise. Now, each of the demons wanted to be evil. I wish I could clarify on that, but this is kind of the Dragon Quest problem. Demise's overall approach was just, I want to rule and destroy. That's it. There's no characterization there. There's no development. There's no motivation. He's evil. This is one of the reasons I don't like Demise as a character, by the way, because there is nothing to him at all. He literally just wants to rule and destroy. That's it. Yeah, he's Demon Dude, exactly. So he wanted to rule and destroy, and Hylia was like, no, dude, this is my house. What are you doing here? So Hylia, who wasn't capable of... Again, remember, Hylia didn't have that much power. She was not at the same level of the goddesses. So she had to use divine artifacts and crafted enchanted materials, as well as recruiting people amongst the actual, people who lived in the world in order to fight with her, in order to defeat Demise. Because the Joker isn't just evil. At least when he's written well. See, just evil can only work if there's something else, or that's it, in my opinion. Also, what the hell, Brickwin? Demise, I can't even call Demise a force of nature. That's part of the problem. If Demise was a force of nature, I would actually be far more interested in him. If he was more of a, to use a direct example, a Lavos character, then that would actually make a lot of sense. That would kind of work for me. Because at that point, it's an elemental thing. It's a natural thing. It's like fighting a volcano. And Demise's connection to all of the villains going forward would also make more sense. But instead, it's a dude who can talk and reason and wants to... Yeah, Majora works far better as a Lavos-type character than Demise does. Go figure. Anyways, I'm getting a little off topic. So Hylia... That's true, Takoida. I shouldn't say natural in that. The whole point of Lavos is that he is alien. But you get the idea. It's something that is not a person. And that would have worked better from my point of view. Anyways, getting way off topic. Hylia got together a whole group of people and said, alright, we're going to deal with this thing. This is stupid. And she walked up to the people of the world and said, alright, people of the world! The people of the world looked back and were like, and so they went to war. Now, they did manage to successfully seal away Demise. Hang on, what in the world? Because, of course, it's always sealing away. And then basically, if it's not obvious, I'm describing the backstory to Skyward Sword. If this sounds familiar, it's because bits and pieces of this are also part of the backstory of Minish Cap. We'll talk more about that whenever we actually play a Minish Cap on character. The relevant point is that Hylia was pretty spent by this, and so Hylia ended up basically dying. But at the same time not, because this series is absolutely in love with reincarnation. So what ended up happening is Hylia basically became a empowered mortal, which would carry on a bloodline and a fated destiny of empowered mortals. Zelda, to say it bluntly. So every single Zelda we encounter is functionally Hylia. Same general power, same general move set, same general access, etc. This can work, but also kind of doesn't work. Take it on its own merit, however you want to think of it. I'm not here to judge it, so to speak. Link's a little bit different. I'll talk about Link in a second. Now I'm going to skip through Skyward Sword because a bunch of stuff happens and Groose becomes an awesome character, and then there's some cool stuff with time travel, and it's just da-da-da-da-da-da. Finally, after a while, it gets to the point where Link manages to successfully imbue Fi, which is the legendary implement as crafted by the ancient goddesses, in order to be this extremely powerful divine blade. Something that literally combats demonic nature at its core. Literally the blade of evil's bane. Excuse me. Look, Groose is awesome, Brazen Bell. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? At the end of Skyward Sword, you end up fighting Demise himself. And I do want to talk about this scene, because it's the only bit of characterization Demise gets at all in the entire game. So the entire game, you haven't been fighting Demise. Or rather, you have, but he's been a big, gross pimple monster. I wish I was making that up. It's pretty dumb. Anyways, no, you've been fighting Girahim the entire time. Girahim is basically he's the polar opposite of Fi. He's very ostentatious, very individual. He talks in flowery nature, and he's very the opposite of what she is, whereas she's far more contained, crisp, robotic. Yeah, but they were so gross. They had a gushing sound effect, Tesla. Just, ugh. Yeah, very emotional. Girahim was very emotional. Girahim is Demise's sword. Now, I feel like theory crafting for just a moment here. Please forgive me. Because the emphasis is that the ancient tech, or whatever, civilization, the one before Skyward Sword, was very, for lack of a better way to put it, robotically advanced, technologically advanced. This has led to some theory crafting. Now, I don't know if I believe this or not, but it would be a very Japanese thing if it was true, very Final Fantasy. The idea is basically that the three goddesses were actually aliens, in a more traditional sense of the word. They were just extremely technologically advanced aliens. Or maybe there was more than just the three, right? And the three came down, programmed and terraformed the world, left behind several artifacts, almost all of which are very advanced and robot-like in their presentation. We'll see this throughout the Zelda series, by the way. And then left behind someone along with to take care of the new denizens. So, yay. Now, whether that's actually... Yeah, kind of like the Protheans. It's a good parallel. Now, whether this is something you want to believe in or not is totally up to you. I only point it out, however, because the Girahim and Fi are both weapons crafted by whoever was before. And both of them are basically robots. In fact, they are literally robot spirits that inhabit swords. Fi, the Master Sword, and Girahim, I forget what it's called. It's, the Blade of Death Doom. I just point that out because I have a feeling that Demise was a part of that thing too, and it would actually make a lot of sense. So I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was totally aliens. Basically, yes, Jay. Anyways, whether that's true or not, that's up to you. This is all the realm of speculation. But I do find it interesting that the supposed evil blade and the divine blade are both literally robots. Anyways, so you end up fighting Demise, and like I said, there's this one scene of actually really cool characterization. What happens is Girahim, who's been a present character the entire game, finally brings back Demise, and he's like, yes! Oh, I've been waiting for this moment for so long, my lord! And Demise kills him, basically. Like, supplements his personality entirely. And Girahim is not seen for the rest of the game. He's gone. And then just picks him up as a sword. It's the only moment of characterization he gets, and it's why I lament the idea that he could have been a force of nature rather than a person. Because it's Girahim and all his devotion and worship he was nothing more than a tool. Which is a common trope, admittedly. No, talking! You end up fighting Demise. You end up destroying Demise. Demise, however, uses the last of his evil demonic power in order to send a curse into, let's call it the reincarnation cycle of the world. Now, this is actually funny, because as a consequence, Demise deliberately ensured that two types of people would be reincarnated throughout the ages. Himself and Link. Because of the nature of how that kind of magic works in this setting, there has to be a counterbalance. There has to be an opposite point that pushes against it, right? So, that's why Link keeps getting reincarnated. Not Zelda. Zelda wasn't a part of this particular curse. Zelda was already going to be reincarnated thanks to her nature as Hylia. I don't know if Demise used rule magic or not, but the way it works sounds like rule magic to me. So if you were asking my judgment on the matter, I'd say yes. So, Demise basically ensured by his curse that his malice or malevolence would continue forward, and would also ensure that the one being that can stop him would keep showing up as well. Yay! Theoretically, yes, Tesla. Like, legitimately. Now, this is when we have to get into the weeds a little bit, because you remember how I mentioned how most of this story wasn't planned from the get-go? And they were just kind of making it up as they go with a bunch of backloaded storytelling. So whether or not the future villains in the game are actually literally Demise reincarnated, or the curse of Demise, or are cursed by Demise, or are Demise's evil power reincarnated, has varied based on what point in time in which you ask the developers. They keep changing their minds on this one. Even this very book actually says something different than the Hyrule Historia, which came out before this book. Up to you. Up to you on that one. I really don't know. I can only guess. I try to ignore the Demise thing, too. I really feel it's deleterious to the rest of the story. It's worth noting, by the way, I mentioned the Demise thing. This is another thing that's changed periodically. It's not going to say it right here, is it? No, here it is, here it is. The Curse of Demise apparently affects people even if they aren't specific reincarnations of himself. And it actually mentions two specific examples. Vati, from Minish Cap and Four Swords Adventures, and Byron, or Brian, or however you say a stupid name, from Spirit Tracks. In short, even if it's not Ganondorf, supposedly, basically every villain in the Zelda franchise came from Demise. Which, can I just say, I really don't like that idea. Oh, I remember Tesla. I remember when I hit the final blow on Calamity in Breath of the Wild, I said, this is for Ganondorf. Oh, the game is frozen. Oh, crap. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, hang on. Hang on. Hey, Malachor. Smack! There we go. Let me just put... This is a big book, by the way. I don't know if this gets it across. This is big and heavy. This thing is ridiculous. Look at this. Ugh. 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 My old man arms can barely carry it. How many? Oh, jeez, how many pages? God, hang on, let me pick the thing back up again. Ugh. 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 327. No, the game's fine. Game's still running. You can tell because the music's still running. And also because it's running right here. See? Boop. See? Game's fine. But it looks like... Yep. Looks like it basically lost connection to the router. Oh, so... That means we get to restart everything. So let's just make sure we're saved. Make absolutely sure here. And then we have to turn off the 3DS. Completely. And then close this. We can start everything all up again. There's only so much I can do about this. Streaming a 3DS game is a colossal pain in the arse. And there's basically nothing I can do about that. This is the best option I have available. We may never know, Tesla. Yeah, exactly, my dude. Every now and again it just fails with no defined reason why. Literally. Give me a moment. There we go. And then connect. There we go. So. Now you're hearing things, Tesla. So all of that is the creation mythos. Now, I mentioned a fifth goddess. The fifth goddess isn't really relevant for any of the three games we'll be covering, believe it or not. But the fifth goddess does deserve to be discussed in brief. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go talk to Heibora Gabora, and then I'm going to give him a negative. And I want you guys to tell me, do you think Heibora Gabora deserves to be a negative for story? Or a negative to gameplay? I was thinking gameplay, because really that's the axis that bothers me about him. Hang on, Baron. Honestly, I'd rather talk about than Twilight, but, you know. So I want to concentrate, because I actually want to accomplish something pretty specific here. So I'm going to roll. Link, look up here. It appears the time has finally come for you to start your adventure. You will encounter many hardships ahead. That is your fate. Don't feel discouraged, even during the toughest of times. If you go straight this way, you will see Hyrule Castle. You'll meet a princess there. If you are lost and don't know what way to go, look at the map. The areas you have explored will be shown on the map. Tap blank on the lower screen to hit the map subscreen. There's also a flashing dot. Yes. So, okay. This is basically the gameplay negative, right here. If you are mashing A because you've played this game... Here, I'll just demonstrate. So let's say I'm mashing A because I played this game before. Now, this game also commits the cardinal sin of text advancement. A lot of games get this wrong. So, if you tap A while text is being rendered, it skips through it a little bit quicker. So basically you get into the habit of double tapping for each text box, right? However, anytime there is a text box that has an option like this one, that doesn't apply. Instead, it cues the button press for whatever option is default selected. So you'd be like tap, 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 and then you have to not hit anything. Because if you tap, tap, it'll go straight to no, even before you've actually had a chance to cancel it out. You have to get down and then hit yes in order to pass through this. It's really dumb. Now I think I'm going to fail. It's too late in the day. And it's harder to do on a 3DS, so give me a moment. I think I aimed it wrong, too. is always one of the hardest tricks in speedrunning this game for me, for some reason. Because the timing on this... Oh, yep, no, I aimed wrong. I aimed wrong. I'm not going to make it. Oh my god! I didn't even skip this properly. Wait a second. Beyond this point, you'll see Kakariko Village. Have you seen the Princess of Hyrule? I suggest you go to the Cala. Do you want to see what I heard it said again? Do you want to hear what I said again? Do you want to hear what I said again? And the funny thing is, yeah, as Tesla Effect says, all you had to do was change the default dialogue option to no, or basically the opposite of what it is. I think I'm going to make it. Did I make it? I made it. Booyaka. Okay. So. I'm not sure if there's going to be a second gameplay negative for that. But there is definitely going to be a gameplay negative for that. That is just stupid. So. Let me make sure I know how to pronounce his, or spell his name right. Kepora Gebora. Let's pull this out over here. I want to show my work anytime I give a negative. And this is no exception. So, negative to gameplay. Gebora, Gebora. Now, some people dislike what I just showed on camera. I'm curious what you guys think of that. So, periodically, and it's about a 5-minute, I think? Maybe it's a 10-minute thing. I actually don't remember in this version. I guess we can start a timer. Hang on. Let's start a timer right now. Give me a moment. No, a timer. There we go. Boop. Okay. No, don't. Whoops. Come here. Come here. There we go. So, periodically, every X minutes, we'll figure out how many in just a moment, Navi will just kind of start flashing, and it'll flash at the bottom of the screen, and it'll flash on your mini-map or menu or whatever. And I'm an idiot. And that's basically the, hey, this is where you're supposed to go during the main plot reminder. Now, on the one hand, that's actually a cool feature. I tend to like games that have a this is what you did last, or this is what you should do next kind of feature. On the other hand, there's no way to opt out of that. I aimed that completely wrong. And the fact that there's no way to opt out of that kinda sucks. Because it'll just sit there, flashing, until you finally figure out what the hell you're supposed to do. There we go. So this would be a reset. Anyways. I'm trying to think. I had a lot of things to talk about as I'm trying to do this thing here. So I'm kind of thinking that deserves to be a negative, mostly because it's completely non-optional. There's no just... I mean, the button to hit Navi is there all the time. I could do it right... Oh. No, I can't do it right now. Holy crap. Well, I could do it back in the day. I could just say, hey, Navi, what should I do? And Navi would be like, oh, well, you should go do this. And I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Instead, it's mandatory. And what I mean by that is it just flickers there at the bottom of the screen, irritating you until you finally acknowledge it. This is doubly irritating if you're doing any side stuff. Ah, that's right, Soraya's song. I forgot about that. I knew there was a way to do it manually. Now, I've never found Hey Listen or Navi in general to be irritating. Not really. But I do kind of think that they hit that particular thing a little bit irritatingly. We'll see how long it is. Yes, so time is frozen whenever... So, okay. There are two types of zones in the game. There's zones in which time moves forward, and zones in which time does not. And that's the simplest way to explain it. This is a time frozen zone, so you can't... hang on. Give me a moment. Let me get a little more height here. So as you can see, the sun is basically stuck in setting format right there, and it's not moving an inch. It only takes a couple of minutes for a full day-night cycle to happen normally. Funnily enough, I kind of like that, even though the day-night cycle thing is basic... Oh, I already got this one. Is basically just a gimmick. I mean, that's kind of how I work, though, Jay. If it doesn't bother me, it doesn't bother me. If it's not a negative to whatever, it's not a negative to whatever. I don't care what other people say. That's not true. Of course I care what other people say. I care what you guys say. It's one of the reasons I like to stream these, is to get your input on it. We're almost up to 4 minutes with no Navi yet. Which isn't a lot, it's worth noting. I don't want to get the Sun Song until I get the bottle. Ah, yes, so, bottles. In every Zelda game from LTTB onwards, there's bottles. And they all follow a pretty similar trend. The basic idea is, the first 3 bottles are usually very easy to get, and in fact are basically in the way. Some of the easiest side quest stuff to do, in short. And yeah, bottles are incredibly important items in virtually every Zelda game. Mostly because bottles effectively are your inventory. Which I know sounds strange, but that's just kind of how they did it. Did I get that one? Anyways. Now the final bottle is almost always very difficult to get. Like in this one you have to get all the big Poes, which is just a nightmare. I'm missing one. Which one am I missing? I shouldn't have jumped into the pit to get the rupees. I got that one, I got that one, I got that one. Did I get the one over here? I thought I did. Yeah, I don't see him. Did I get the one up here? I thought I just got him. But yes, bottles are how you store potions to heal yourself, to restore your magic, to buff yourself in some case. Wind Waker. I thought I got the one in the box. And I thought I already got the 2 on the other side of the windmill. Oh, right. I threw one over from across the wall. I never actually picked him up. That's the one I'm missing. There he is. This is the one I threw over the wall. And yes, to get 1-ups. That's how you get 1-ups in this game. Now, this is actually a pretty important distinction. I'll talk about why in just a second. You got the bottle. Now, in a Mario game, you don't really have health in the traditional sense of the word. You don't. Instead, what you have is... Oh, I should go do that. Except I can't. I could do that, but I'm trying... No, I'm not going to glitch it. I could go into the well right now, but I'm not going to. I'm mentally thinking of my speedrun route, and I really shouldn't. I'm sorry, guys. So yeah, in Mario games, you don't really have health in the strictest sense of the word. You have lives, and that's really the main focus of it. At most, you have 3 health in a Mario game. In a Zelda game, you have plenty of health. In fact, your health isn't even just the number of hearts you have, because each heart actually represents 4, technically 8, damage. So each heart is technically 8 health, depending on the Zelda game. I should clarify that. I think it's actually 4 in this one in particular, but regardless. And so each enemy does an amount of damage based on your armor, and based on your shield, and based on a couple of other factors that will then take X amount of damage out of you, reducing your health. In short, most of how you survive in this game, most of how you keep playing, is entirely dependent on the health side of things, and maintaining your health. Thus, in a Mario game where you could have like 30 lives, in a Zelda game you can have 4. Jesus Christ, I'm going to stab you, Gibora. No, Baron, because I'd have to practice again, and I'm completely out of practice. So you see how I was just a couple of seconds away from nighttime. So I almost didn't make that. In fact, technically, I didn't make that, because the idea is then to make it from here to the castle gates before it hits nighttime. So I was actually too slow. And that's because I didn't aim right. So again, I suck. Anyways. So that's why bottles are so damn important. Because they allow you to live, they allow you to heal, they allow you to store items or buffs or whatever. They are functionally your inventory in the typical RPG sense of the word. Now, I was going to talk about something else while I was sitting here. We talked about lore. We talked about demise and how dumb he is. There's actually a couple things we could do now, but I don't really want to. Yeah, bottles are incredibly valuable. Now, I did want to mention one thing. So in in LTTP, you actually needed another item in order to really make the bottles useful. That item is the net, the butterfly net. In this game, you don't need that. In fact, here, I'll demonstrate really quick by doing this. I could just swing the bottle by itself in order to capture things. I don't need a separate item to get it. Now, we'll talk about the Gerudo and the war pretty soon, I think, because it's actually going to be relevant in just a minute here. There's actually a few points in time we should... what am I, rupee? Yeah, we need rupees. There's a few points in time in which the war comes up. I mean, that is true, Muad'Dib. Listen, pots must die, yo. All pots must die. I know what you're thinking. Why isn't that guard stopping you? Man, I'm so bored. Things would be much more interesting if there were more troubles in the world. Hey, that's just between you and me, okay? Anyway, maybe we could let off some steam by breaking some jars. Yes, that's right. The guard actually encourages you to break these pots. On the off chance you head in here and you've never really done that before. So, this is Hyrule Town, Castle Town, to be more accurate. This is going to be a recurring feature in basically every Zelda from this point onwards, even including Breath of the Wild to a small extent. Castle Town is exactly what it sounds like. It's the main central city of the Hyrule Kingdom. Now, this is one of my favorites here. I'm not dancing, my back itches. Ooh, ah, ooh. This is... Yes, I'm ready to destroy all of them. This is new. In LTTP, there was Kakariko, and that was it. That was the only kind of... Well, that's not true. There's also Thieves Town, but that's really a separate thing. But yeah, the long and the short of it is there was no real demonstration of civilization in LTTP. Ocarina still has what I call the SNES RPG effect, because this place is still extremely tiny. In fact, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens big, and that's it. And it's like 10 buildings. But this is their first attempt at actually showcasing the fact that a civilization exists in the world. This also came with an increase in the general number of NPCs in the game, which again goes towards the overall increase in the attempt at storytelling. Almost all these NPCs have nothing to say. Like, nothing relevant to the plot. Those two are in love. She really loves her dog. She's, her back itches. He's just saying you should enjoy your time. She's saying she made a lot of money going to Lake Hylia and finding things in the river. This is the vendor that allows you to sell things from a bottle. So they actually allow you to sell items in this game. It's awkward and irritating to do, but you can do it. She asked about the Shadow Folk, the Sheikah, the Shadows of Hylians. They say they swore allegiance to the King of Hyrule and guarded the royal family. But with the long peace, no one's seen a Sheikah around here in a long time. However, I heard there's one Sheikah woman living in the castle. Dun, dun, dun. You know about the Temple of Time? Legends say the Temple of Time is the entrance to the Sacred Realm. Did you know that? Nah. He's the running man. He doesn't want to deal with us. There's the laughter people. So, this is actually funny. I found a small hole at the side of the castle I thought I could sneak through, but I got stuck there. This is actually the only hint in-game of the path you're supposed to take to reach Zelda. Now, in the interest of fairness, you can just muddle your way through trial and error, and Lord knows that's what I did. But I find it interesting they actually showcase how to do that in-game. How many rupees do I have? I do not have enough. There's a couple item shops you can go into. We're not doing that yet. There's Lon Lon Ranch, which we will actually be going to in a minute. So a lot of the assets and resources as far as camera work and engine work were shared, Harriet, but it was a different development team, so basically none. So here's a mask shop. Huh. So this is one of the other major side quests. This is a good time to mention that Ocarina of Time started the series' fascination and general approach to side quests, in the fact that they exist at all. LTTP kind of had side quests. Barely. Like, for example, you could find the blacksmith dwarf and lead him home, or you could take the chest to Gary, or I don't even know what else. There's not a lot of examples, basically. This game embraced the concept of side quests. Now, I have heard a rumor that was never actually verified, but I want to mention it just the same, because it does actually make sense to me. Oh yeah, the Pyramid Fairy is another one. The rumor is that this game got a lot of its embracing of side quests, because Miyamoto also worked on another game before this one called Super Mario RPG. Now, on the off chance you don't remember what Super Mario RPG did, it had a lot of side quests, like a surprisingly large number. And a lot of them varied rather substantially in overall approach and design. So, make of that what you will. Notice, so this is the other thing I want to kind of point out here. This is in demonstrable contrast to what they've done earlier. This is a design choice, not a tech choice. They specifically... The game camera is actually still here and still functioning basically the exact same way that the game camera always does. It's just, it's locked to us, and it's sitting in the middle of this fountain, just tilting left and right as we tilt. And in certain other areas, it's specifically locked to a specific position and doesn't follow us at all, like this spot, for example. Camera's just locked up here. This was a design choice to try and vary several areas of the game and basically give them a different visual distinction to, for lack of a better way to put it, adventure areas. Hey, your clothes, they're different. You're not from around here, are you? Oh, you're a fairy boy from the forest. My name's Malon. Malon? Malone? And there's way too much fanfiction about you and me. My dad owns Lon Lon Ranch. Dad went to the castle to deliver some milk. He hasn't come back yet. I'm sure he's fine. This is the 3DS version, yes. Hey look, it's Kebora Bokebora. It's a different one, Hourglass. Hey Link! I hate all of you, and I just want you to die. You must rot in hell. Yep, there we go, we're good. Oh my god. Now I'm kind of on a timer here to be efficient about it. So I'm going to try to be efficient. See you around, Brazenbell. Or is it Brazenbell? I don't know. Yeah, we'll talk about Luigi later, because we do have something to say about him, believe it or not. I am in a hurry here, so that's why I'm rolling here, so I'm justified. I also screw this up periodically, because I'm a moron, so please forgive me. Also, how many of you have actually made fairies happen in this realm? Because I never have succeeded at it. It's entirely about the nature of how it's presented, Harian, which is why I give it a gameplay negative. There we go. And we're good. I will stab you, Final Harmony. So let's start getting things in position. There's Mario, lazing it away as always. Oh, and if it needs to be said, yes, these are very deliberate references to Mario and Luigi. This was actually after they had started the beginnings of characterizing both characters, but hadn't actually really gone full tilt with it, because again, the only characterization both had up until this point was Super Mario RPG. And the comic. Now, I can make that jump without doing this, but I kind of want to wake him up. So, we're just going to chill for a minute and talk about the fifth goddess. So, Jesus, that guy is snoring loud. Let's get out of here. There we go. So we have Din, Furore, Naryu, Hylia, and Time, the goddess of time. The goddess of time is referenced several times in the Zelda franchise, but if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure I'm not on this one because I looked this up just this morning, the first time the goddess of time is referenced is in this game, a game in which Aonuma was involved in the franchise. And she isn't really a major player until the next game, Majora's Mask, which was the one Aonuma was mainlining. In short, I think the goddess of time, the fifth goddess, was an invention of Aonuma that he started weaving into the narrative. She will start showing up periodically in the background in several Zelda games, including Breath of the Wild, actually. Now, she's never had a lot of on-screen presence. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, it's entirely possible she's technically Hylia. The only downside with that, the only reason I don't believe that... Look, I have trouble with R's being in the wrong place, Purple Boy. What do you want from me? So, I don't think she's Hylia, personally. Because Hylia is Zelda. It's a little bit too... it doesn't work for me, you know. So I do think there is, in fact, a second, or I should say a fifth goddess out there. What in tarnation? That person get a little shut-eye around here. Hello. Who might you be? Yeah, I'm Talon, owner of the Lon Lon Ranch. I went to the castle to deliver some milk. I sat down here to rest. I guess I fell asleep. What, Malin was looking for me? Oh, I'm going to catch it from her now. She's going to let me have it. Run, Japanese humor. In short, I would say with high certainty that the Goddess of Time is in fact a fifth and distinct goddess. The one big similarity the Goddess of Time has with Hylia is that she gives a damn. There are several points in basically every game she shows up where she is actually helpful and actually goes out of her way to help the situation and help the character. In contrast to the original three. Alright, how many times do you think I'm going to get caught by this? It's not hard. I just get caught by this all the damn time. Because I suck. I'll even be cautious instead of speedrunning. So these are on a universal cycle. All of them are loaded and all of them are on their cycles when you first start out. If you're seen, you start over from the beginning. These guards actually have a really strange vision range. It's kind of hard to properly explain. It's kind of Metal Gear Solid-y, but at the same time it's kind of not. What's effectively happening is each of them are kind of... I'm trying to how to explain. They basically have a cast of vision in front of them at any given point in time. God, I fall off that so often on the N64 version. And I mentioned that cast, you know, as in they're casting a spell kind of a thing. Because periodically you can actually go in front of them and not be seen if you manage to get one of the intervals. I am not that good, so I won't even be trying such a thing. Go. Go. Oh my god. Okay. On the one hand, stealth sections kind of suck. In fact, I would say that Spirit Tracks does the stealth section much better. On the other hand, I find myself wondering, like, you know, if it makes a little bit of sense given the circumstances. We are literally sneaking into the castle without having rights to be in here. Hey, don't cause any trouble. Oh, there it is. Hang on, hang on. That was 25 minutes, almost to the T. So there you go. Every 25 minutes she bugs you to go do the plot stuff. Okay. God, I've been talking a lot. There's a lot to cover here. Let's talk after the cutscene, because there's a bit to cover here, too. Who are you? How'd you get past the guards? Flex. No, oh, what's that? Is that a fairy? Then, are you from the forest? Then you wouldn't happen to have the spiritual stone of the forest, would you? Do you have it? Well, yeah. Just as I thought. I had a dream. In the dream, a dark storm clouds were billowing over the land of Hyrule. But suddenly, a ray of light shot out from the forest, parted the clouds, and lit up the ground. The light turned into a figure holding a green and shining stone, followed by a fairy. I knew this was a prophecy that someone would come from the forest. Yes, I thought you might be the one. So, this is Hylia. Say hello to the goddess, Hylia. I say the goddess, I really shouldn't, because she's kind of not. She's just vaguely magical. She has no domain, no portfolio, no powers. She is vaguely magical. That's her abilities. So... anyways. It does help to explain why she has vague magical abilities every time she shows up, because she's literally Hylia. Oh, sorry, I got carried away with my story. Didn't even properly introduce myself. I am Zelda, Princess of Hyrule. What's your name? Ganon. Strange, it sounds familiar. Yeah, demigod might actually be more accurate, given the setting. Okay then, Link, I'm going to tell you a secret of the sacred realm that's been passed down by the royal family of Hyrule. Keep this a secret from everyone, because references. The three goddesses hid the Triforce containing the power of the gods somewhere in Hyrule. The power to grant the wish of the one who holds the Triforce in his hands. If someone with a righteous heart makes a wish, it will lead Hyrule to a golden age of prosperity. If someone with an evil mind has his wish granted, the world will be consumed by evil. This is what's been foretold. The deliberate reference to LTTP, by the way. So the ancient sages built the Temple of Time to protect the Triforce from the evil ones. She just says, no, you have to keep it secret. Every dialogue choice in this game is, but thou must. Every single one of them. That's right, the Temple of Time is the entrance through which you can enter the sacred realm from our world. But the entrance is sealed with a stone wall called the Door of Time. In order to open that door, it said you need to collect 3 spiritual stones. Another thing you need is the treasure the royal family keeps along with this legend, the Ocarina of Time. Do you understand the story I just told you? No. Yes, I do. That's great. Now, look through this window to the very small amount of politics that are in this game. This is Ganondorf, leader of the Gerudo people, bowing in supplication to the King of Hyrule. That needs to be unpacked a little bit, because there's actually some decent relevance behind that. So just prior to the, I say just prior, several years prior to this game, there was a war. It was not a pleasant war. Point in fact, they've never covered the exact details of this war, although having thought about this and reading through the book again, I do have a theory. A lore theory. Thanks for watching. I think that this war was actually the war referenced in Twilight Princess. At least in part. Not in whole. In short, I think that the greater war was started as a result of the events of Twilight Princess, and when that started to wind down, it became a more martial military struggle between those who were left behind, which happened to include, by the way, the Gerudo and the Hylians. Now, it is also probably worth noting that one thing we do know was at least part of this war was in fact a civil war, because Hylians were fighting other Hylians for access to the Sacred Realm. Now, there's a lot we can infer from this, but let me just go ahead and say, we don't know details. That's it. We know that it was a civil war. We know it was a war. We know that our parents died in this war. Basically, our mother died to bring us to the Kokiri Forest. Spoiler, by the way. And we know the Gerudo were involved in the war. And I think that is it. Everything else is just completely up in the air. However, based on these events, and the events as described in Wind Waker, as well as in Twilight Princess, I personally have a feel... Yeah, exactly, Geludo. That's kind of the direction I was thinking. I personally have a feeling that the Gerudo in particular were actually a... how do I say this? A mercenary group that was working for one of the factions in the Civil War. Now... this would make sense, since Ganondorf himself, the leader of the Gerudo, is personally in supplication to the King of Hyrule. Right here, in this scene that we're staring at. Now, that is of course a presumption. It is entirely possible that Ganondorf has only come to, bow in supplication to the king now, and never did so before. But you could probably see why I prefer the earlier option. It would also help to kind of emphasize how, well, let's just say it helps some of Ganondorf's motives. Because the idea here is that King Hylia won the war, the Civil War. And then the Gerudo get to keep living in the desert. And as we find out in a couple other things, including this game and Wind Waker, it's not fun to live in the desert. It's pretty harsh and unforgiving. So this could have been one of the major pushes for Ganondorf to go ahead and try and seek a measure to simply conquer the realm and claim the wind, right? Now, all of that is presumption, not actual codified lore. But I do think that lines up pretty neatly with what we learn in this game and the next two, in the core trilogy. Anyways. Yeah, the King of Hyrule is not a good person. That being said, he is definitely someone who tries to make up for his mistakes. It's just, he made mistakes. That is Ganondorf, leader of the Gerudo. They hail from the desert far to the west. Though he swears allegiance to my father, I am sure he is not sincere. The dark clouds that cover Hyrule in my dream, they must symbolize that man. A few trillion years, I don't know, Orient. What happened? Did he see you? Don't worry, he doesn't have any idea what we're planning. Yet. Yes, I told my father about my dream. However, he didn't believe it was a prophecy. Yeah, that's another recurring theme, by the way. The King of Hyrule being a dick to his daughter, who happens to be Hylia, aka Zelda. But I can sense that man's evil intentions. What Ganondorf is after must be nothing less than the Triforce of the Sacred Realm. He must have come to Hyrule to obtain it. And he wants to conquer Hyrule. No, the entire world! Okay, this is mildly significant. With a few vague exceptions in Zelda 2, Hyrule has been described as the world in just about every Zelda game. This is the first time they start to mention that Hyrule is simply one area of the world. Just a nice little tidbit there. Very, very, very minor amount of world building. Link, now we are the only ones who can protect Hyrule. Please! I don't believe you! Please believe me, my prophecies have never been wrong. Please, I don't believe you. Just demonstrating what I said earlier. My prophecies have never been wrong. Please believe me. Okay. Thank you. Come again. I'm afraid I have a feeling that man is going to destroy Hyrule. Confirmation? No, Hourglass. Although we'll talk about that when we get... We have to talk about... I want to save several of our discussions about the fate of Hyrule until we get to both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, because there's a lot to unpack there, and I'd rather do that in those games. Those are pretty large games. It's fortunate you've come. We must not let Ganondorf get the Triforce. I will protect the Ocarina of Time with all my power. You find the other spiritual stones. Let's get the Triforce before Ganondorf does, and then defeat him. One more thing. Take this letter. It's a key item. Which will go ahead. Oh, it's already on my thing. Okay, whatever. I know what you're thinking. Man, that was a long cutscene, Lore. Yeah, we got one more. I am Impa of the Sheikah. I am responsible for protecting Princess Zelda. Everything is exactly as the princess foretold. Okay, so let's unpack what the Sheikah are. Okay, so now that we've covered that. You are a courageous boy. You are heading out on a big new adventure, aren't you? My role in the princess's dream was to teach a melody to the one from the forest. This is an ancient melody passed down by the royal family. So, this is the introduction of a major mechanic of Ocarina of Time. Music. What? Bullcrap. I should actually do that, hang on. I was just doing that for effect there, but there's the two big ones. Which one, Hourglass? There are so many theories. You might as well just tell me. So many theories. Yeah, unfortunately, Pugity brings up a very good plot hole. And let's be clear, it is a plot hole. One of the points in Twilight Princess? Yes, in Twilight Princess, is that after young Link is sent to the past, he tells Zelda what's going on. Zelda tells the king, and they stop Ganondorf before he gets started. Now, that's a huge plot point, and it's critically important to the overall character development of Ganondorf himself. But it's a point in this game that the king doesn't listen to her and is basically an idiot. This is also referenced in Wind Waker, because that's the same king. But in Twilight Princess's timeline, which is the same king, he suddenly decides to listen to her. Anyways. So, go to Death Mountain. This is also the beginning of Death Mountain not being a horrible place, by the way. They only keep calling it Death Mountain because they've been calling it Death Mountain since Zelda 1. But the point is that Death Mountain has been a very recurring element in the series to date. This is also the invention of the Gorons, by the way, who are kind of awesome. They're basically dwarves, but a little bit different from standard dwarves. Right, I want to go this way first. I guess max time, but you can probably see why I'm not really willing to give this one any slack. This is just a plot hole, and we should just acknowledge that. Actually, I love that idea too, Final Harmony. See you around, Pep Dog. Have a good one. I love the idea that Impa had basically been watching us as we approached the castle, like, yeah, okay, he's not a threat, we're cool. He probably even recognized us as the person from Prophecy that Zelda had told her about. So, Lon Lon Ranch. There's actually quite a few things you could do here, which are basically 90% optional. That's kind of cool. I just wanted to comment on that really quick. So let's try and get our second bottle. I'm probably going to suck at this. In fact, let's get a save in really quick. Epona is optional, but only if you do things in a certain order or know what you're doing. Story negative for plot hole? That would be a plot hole in Twilight Princess, not in Ocarina. A plus for music, but Ocarina's music sucks! It's the worst music in the history of ever. Okay, I'm going to pay attention to the game for this one. I'm actually going to look at my 3DS, basically. Because I want to get this. So, give me a second. I think I'm going to fail this. Yeah, I don't have any idea where it is now. Nope, no. Completely lost it. I'll try again. I do really want this bottle. There are extra strategies you can use here. But there is a decent amount of RNG involved. Jesus. Nope. Damn. We have to find 3 Cuckoos. There's nothing that indicates where they are, other than the initial shot. You get one shot right there of where they are. That's it. There he is. There's actually better luck than usual. See, they roam randomly. So actually finding the right 3, I guess, there's obviously some tactics involved. I don't want to make it sound like it's pure RNG. But there's definitely some RNG involved. So would you like to marry Malon? Yes! Oh, just kidding. You're too young for that, aren't you? But, have some milk. It's 2 bottles now. Harriet is asking me questions for a game I'm not playing for several days. Give me a second. Let me pull up the specific section of it. Oh, this isn't even going to cover it, is it? No, it's not. Yeah, it's not going to cover it there. It's going to cover it up here. Oh yeah, we have to give a negative for health beeps. Of course we do. Because that's just how that works. No, next one. Yeah, by the way, music is a very recurring theme in the series, along with water. The game has a weird fascination with aquatic things. It's hard to properly explain. I suppose I should mention rupees while we're at it. Rupees are... Sorry. It's just a bunch of different things about the rupees here. But anyways, so once upon a time, back before Skyward Sword, they actually did use coins for some weird reason. However, The reason I say for some weird reason is it kind of fell out of favor, and instead everyone decided to use gems instead. This is a very strange thing if you think about it. Because gems are almost universally a worse currency than minted coins. Usually you would use gems as a currency in a case where a civilization doesn't have an established nationality or system of governance. And yet in almost all of the Zelda games there is at least one substantial nation. Is this it? No, it's not going to talk about it. The robots people were brought up here, although of course it's not going to say anything specific about them, because why would it do that? That's just crazy. Stupid thing. It's not going to tell me. Whatever. I'll have to look it up later, Harriet. Ugh. Listen, Jay. When Princess Ruta wants to have... Like, if she didn't have the eyes, you know... Probably max time. As usual, there's probably a simplistic explanation here. But yes, I've given a negative for this before. I will give the negative for this again. Beep, 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 beep. God. Okay. What was I doing? Let's go... Let's do this, actually. Sorry. Oh, yes! You might be wondering why so many females are in this game who are romantically interested in Link. Did you know? I swear I'm not making this up. There was originally a dating sub-mechanic in this game. Seriously. Now, when I say originally, I'm talking in design documents that never actually made it into the core game. I didn't hear the wolf howl. This is one of the reasons why Ruto and Malon and Zelda there we go. Are the way they are, basically. Just getting a few things real quick while I'm here. Where is it? I swore it was up there. Whatever. But yes, that was actually a planned thing. Yes, thankfully this was never a thing actually implemented. Because you know everyone would go for Ruto, and that would just be terrifying. I guess I can't get that other one right now, so... Because that one's like right here, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to wait for the boomerang on that one. Oh god, different timelines for each one. Yes, tasteful dating sim. That's definitely what I think of when I think of dating sims. What time is it? Oh, Lore Mom just messaged me. I plan to get at least a few of the gold Skulltulas. I don't think I'm going to 100% it, though. Good morning! Exclamation mark. I've started the Zelda Lorerun, comma. And of course today is the 8th anniversary as well, period. I didn't really have anything fancy for it, comma. Do you think I should get something? Question mark. Yeah, a wallet upgrade is pretty normal for me to get in this game. You know, that's fair, low-res gamer. Nintendo has a weird talent for doing things that other people just couldn't come across. I was actually just about to mention Super Paper Mario in that, but there's also... I mean, Splatoon is probably my favorite example of Nintendo pulling off what other developers just couldn't. You know? What do you mean, Final Harmony? Whoop! Princess Zelda's handwriting. Let's see. This is Link. He's in my safe Hyrule. What kind of funny game has our princess come up with now? Okay, alright. You can go. Be careful, Mr. Hero. But wait. If you're going to climb Death Mountain, you should get a proper shield. It's an active volcano. You should go back, go to the bazaar, tell them I sent you, you'll get a special discount. I'd like to ask a favor. No, I don't expect it just because I gave you a great tip. I'm just asking. Have you been to the Happy Mask shop? Everyone's talking about it. My little boy pesters me for a popular mask, but I don't have time to go there. Could you get the mask for me next time you're at the market? Sigh. Poor guy. Should we help him, guys? Should we help him with his mask problem? Lack of mask problem. Go around. Man, I freaking love this town. Who's that freaking guy? What's this thing and why? I mean, the Gorons are a friendly people, so it's not like there's a lot of danger going up Death Mountain. They have a equivalent relationship going on. I was gonna say, yeah, it'd probably be more of a BioWare situation. An RPG that happened to have romance in it. So with extremely few exceptions, the game always tells you where someplace is to use a song or whatever. That's not really plus-worthy, but it is definitely the absence of negative-worthy. I wanted to mention it because far too many games have what I call walkthrough-itis, where there's just nothing in the game to really indicate what you're supposed to do and where and how. Ocarina of Time pretty well bypasses walkthrough-itis, with only a few exceptions, namely some of the rarer Skulltulas and some of the heart pieces. Yeah, exactly. Having these little indicators like this prevents you from having to scan every inch of every room. My most dangerous... Oh yeah, I should show this off. Keese, when you get close to it, use L targeting. Even if it flies away, you can still target it. Just little tidbits of helping you to fight these enemies is what that is. Just thought I'd point that out because I didn't earlier. Like an idiot. Fine. You know, hypothetically, there should be several earlier on. Let's do this route. This route. Okay. There should be several, Zeldas in several of these tomes. Tomes, whatever. This poem is dedicated to the memory of the dearly departed members of the royal family. The rising sun will eventually set, and newborn's life will fade. From sun to moon, moon to sun. Give peaceful rest to the living dead. Interesting poem. Huh? Something else is inscribed on the tombstone. The secret melody of the Composer Brothers. A song I'll be using a lot of, which is why we're grabbing it now. Yeah, a lot of parts of this game creeped me out quite a bit. That is true, Dirty Benji. I stand by my statement because... This is why I say it's basically not a plus, because there is still example of the game doesn't tell you anything here and there throughout the game. But I think it's to an acceptable level, put simply. So what these do is... that. Now, Redeads are interesting game design. On the one hand, all they really do is stun lock you and then kill you. So you might be thinking, oh my god, that's horrible. But on the other hand, they're actually designed in a way so that they don't immediately win. They are really slow. Not just in their actual movement, but in their animation and their turning. In short, a Redead has to actually slowly turn, and then inch towards you, and then kill you in the face. And I point that out because they almost always give you enough time to recover from the stun before they actually start killing you. I know, it's not the best example in the world, but it is worth noting that the Redeads could be incredibly cheap enemies if they were not designed the way they were. And, lest I forget to mention this, they are also wonderfully creepy. Yeah, they literally call them Redeads in the game. That's why they're called that. If you're asking why, they call everything weird things. These are cuckoos, for God's sakes. Not chickens. Cuckoos. There's also Lizalfos and Stalfos. And I feel like there's like 3 or 4 other Phos that I can't remember off the top of my head. Yes, that's the weapon of Cluck Destruction. Sorry. That is fair, Dirty Benji. I will try to put myself in the shoes of someone who's never played this game when we get to later dungeons. I know, Jay, I know. It's so hard, though. Must speedrun Zelda. This is one of the only games I put a lot of time and work into, too, so it's kind of actually ingrained in me a bit. So, the Happy Mask Shop. This is a side quest that has no real point to it, which is actually funny. I like doing it because you get tiny little lore tidbits, and also it's the dude from Majora's Mask, obviously. So the way this works is actually kind of amusing. Basically, he gives you a mask, and then you have to go sell it, and then you have to go return the sale price to him. Now, you don't actually have to turn into him. You only have to turn into him if you want to move on to the next step. So, for example, I could go sell the Keaton mask right now to the guy in Kakariko, and then not turn it in, and just keep the money and pocket it. But if I want to progress through the side arc, then I do have to do that. I've decided after some thought, because we're getting so close to lunch break, I'm just going to do this little side quest, because we got 2 steps of this we can do right now. Must go faster! And then, you know, after having said done so, we will pause for lunch, and then we'll go ahead and do the Gorons. I have never seen anything that indicates he is not the exact same guy from Ocarina, Pokety. So, in response to Hourglass's question, technically nothing is anymore, thanks to, you know, copyright issues. But originally, yes. Trying really hard not to roll. Just... You want to know how hard I'm trying? Every now and again, my thumb is tapping the 3DS. There's a rhythm to it. There's a very specific rhythm to rolling. You don't just mash it. It's hit, hit, hit. Oh, right. Do you think you're in disguise, Mr. Hero? Oh, is that a key something character mask? I hear he's very popular recently. He's my boy's favorite. That key something mask. If you don't mind, will you sell it to me? Yay! You earned a little profit. And of course it's for his kid. That's why he's going to be wearing that mask for the rest of the game. Actually, there were no Bastion echoes who were assigned to this Hourglass. This was a case of a local agent. So for those of you who actually give a damn about the extant, one of the things that the Bastion usually would do would be, rather than assigning one of their people to do a deep infiltration job, they would recruit people from the setting, who know the setting well, who are of a mindset as to be Bastion personnel, basically. Must not... Ah, screw it! Screw it! Yeah, screw that. I watch Pixar films for Pixar. They're good films. I should probably go get Epona. That's a fair point. I should also sneeze. Okay, maybe not. God, I hate it when a sneeze just sits there. And it's like, you know, you have to sneeze. You can't, but you have to. Zelda, actually, Savicom, which probably won't surprise you if you think about it. I don't actually know Hariant. I do know that Aonuma had several ideas for Majora's Mask that were batting around his head, and I actually mentioned this earlier. Some of the ideas that were supposed to go into this game that ended up not getting into it were then baked into Majora's Mask. Oh. Of the show, of course! Exclamation mark. No, Link got to retire. Nah, don't link that, Hourglass. At this point, it's such a different thing. I should just delete that video. But yeah, the original idea I had, which has since been destroyed, because I came up with it years ago and plenty of other games have come out since. But the general idea I had was, if you pay attention to the Zelda timelines, all three of them end with a happy ending at a certain point. Now, all three of them also keep going after that point, which kind of destroys the point. But all three of them ended at a point where Ganon is basically removed from the table. LTTP, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess. Well, I mean, not entirely max time, but yes, that bet was involved. I'll probably talk more about that whenever we actually play Majora's Mask, which we're not doing for this core lore run, as a reminder. Anyways, so the idea was that in all three timelines, the Zelda of those particular eras was approached. So this kid really wants to be Arl Heart-Pounding, but he's not buying the... Why is he not buying the mask? What am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm an idiot. This is the skull mask. Right. My bad. I'm on the wrong mask. My bad. God. Speedruns usually don't... I don't do 100% speedruns, generally, so... I'm a dummy, is what I'm trying to say. We need to get something here anyways. We literally have to do this in order to be able to progress, so... What was I saying? So what is the Imperium? Eric gave a fairly accurate example, but it's actually not called the Imperium anymore for branding reasons. Yes, backwalking is the third fastest move speed in this game. Obviously, you know, being on the horse... What am I doing? Being on the horse is faster, and bomb sliding is faster, but I'm not going to do bomb sliding, don't worry. Then there's backwalking, and then there's rolling. How many of you used to have trouble with this back when you were a kid on the N64? See, like, for example, Hourglass just gave a description of the Imperium, which is actually kind of inaccurate. Just grabbing that while we're here. No, Navi. So speaking of sound design... Oh my god, I hate you. I hate your stupid face, and I will stab you in it. Oh crap, I hit the wrong button there, I apologize. So, speaking of sound design... So you see how it gets quieter? Here, I'll just go quiet so you can tell. Now, it's not just when you enter the tube. It's basically, there's a whole directional sound thing that they do. Now, they only do it the first time you go through here. So every subsequent time, you better know where you're going. This is also the Ocarina of Time's variant on the Lost Woods trope, which is something that was also present in the very original Legend of Zelda. Basically, if you go the wrong way, you end up getting warped back to the beginning. See what I mean by the wait and then attack thing? Alright, Jay. I'm afraid I'm going to need you to turn in your brain, because you are obviously insane, sir. Oops. Also, fun with camera angles here. We actually have to go through here twice, but both times we go through, it's a pretty different experience. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'm sure players would leap at the opportunity, Terra. There we go. So we do have to get this to progress unless we cheat, which obviously we can, and by cheat I mean glitch. This game is very glitchable. And thus the idea is... So obviously the game can't literally do this in the way they intended. But the idea is that we've been following her playing the ocarina this entire time. This is the Sacred Forest Meadow. It's my secret place. I feel this place will be very important for both of us someday. When I'm dead and you're older. If you play the ocarina with me, I can teach you to talk with the spirits in the forest. Would you like to play the ocarina with me? Don't do it! Okay. Try to follow along with the melody I will play. Are you ready? Now, we will use several songs throughout this game, but we have just learned the second to last of the core songs that we will use several times throughout this game. Zelda's theme, Soraya's theme, Epona's theme, and the Sun, the Song of Sun, or whatever that's called. Those are the big ones. Now, right now, yeah, it feels weird hitting R, Y, X, but anyways, as of right now, this serves as a gameplay mechanic to get hints on what to do next, but will literally be mandatory for progressing through the game multiple times, including basically the next quest, the very next thing we're supposed to do. Notice in this version there's a nice big forest medallion here, and so this is a good time to mention something really quick here. So this is the forest medallion. Sure looks an awful lot like a windmill, right? Like a wind thing. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to Ganon's Tower, but the long and the short of it is, originally, this wasn't the forest place, this was the Wind Temple. And the Water Temple was the Ice Temple. However, they have since taken these ideas and stretched out with them in, you know, future stuff. Nope, no. Try that again. This is my personal favorite fairy fountain, by the way, because the teleport to the forest leads right where I just was. So it's one of the easiest accesses to a fairy fountain in the entire game, in my opinion. I suppose I should explain fairies on the incredibly off chance you've never played a Zelda game before. So if you have a fairy in your bottle, remember how we had that whole discussion about how bottles were very important earlier? It means that if you die, you get back up. In Final Fantasy terms, it's re-raise. In Super Mario terms, it's a 1-up, or Mega Man terms. It is incredibly useful, and I tend to have at least one fairy on me at any given point in time, just in case. Oh my god, it's the guy who is here, and he will not be here anymore, because I will rip his head off and eat it with a bit of mustard. Okay. There are entire strategies designed around bypassing frickin' Kibora Gibora. No joke. No, a Phoenix Down doesn't really apply here. Because you can't Phoenix Down yourself if you die. Oh, you're right, I forgot the Skull Mask. Thank you, thank you. No, I have not, Theoretical. I'm guessing it's amusing. What's funny is Gebora Gebora is almost entirely undescribed or unexplained in the game proper. In fact, it was not officially codified until the Hyrule Historia came out. It was like 5 years ago or whatever at this point. Until we finally learned he really was Rauru, the Sage of Light. Whoop, yep, let's try that again. So yes, that's Skull Kid. Yes, that's Skull Kid. Yeah. Quite an unusual mask you may have there. I like it. May make me look a little bit tougher. So yes, Skull Kid is in 3 Zelda games. The same Skull Kid. We'll be talking about him again when we get to Twilight Princess. Anyways, that may look me a bit tougher. Why don't you give it to me? Oh, I'm gonna wear this all the time. You lost money, yay. The idea is that the owl is basically his, for lack of a better way to put it, Dark World form. Poogity. So the idea is that Rauru is someone who is native to the Sacred Realm, and anytime you shift between the Sacred Realm or this realm, dependent on the nature of it, your form can be changed. This is something that's shown most commonly in LTTP, but it actually comes up in several other Zeldas in more minor and less, holy crap kind of ways. So, the idea is that Rauru naturally looks like an owl whenever he journeys to the Light Realm, to this realm. Which one, Max Time? Unless you mean the Link is dead, in which case, I'll roll my eyes and then move on. Well, Hourglass, I would answer you, but unfortunately I can't. But I can tell you to go to the website. I'm not going to make it. There's no way. But that's okay. I'm sorry, I just really hate the main character is dead theories. There's only 2, but both of them irritate me. I might actually make this. I'm gonna laugh. It's gonna turn up right as I... Oh my god, I can't believe I made that. I cannot believe I made that. So for those of you who know where the drawbridge raises at nighttime. God, this couple are still dancing. Get a room. Ugh. Oh, right there. Not okay. Where the heck? Hang on, guys. Hang on. Where is she? Okay, I've got to be blind. I must have walked right by her. Because I am not seeing her. God, it's been too long since I've done this. Ugh. Well, thank you, Mez. That took longer than it probably should have. Yeah, I'm looking for the lady with her dog. Which, if memory serves, is this dog right here. Nope. this one? Well, you see, they used to have a bug problem. Then they had a stray cat problem. Then they had a stray dog problem. I'm probably inverting my memory. What do you want to bet? Because I was remembering the dog as being back here and her as being in the square. So I'm probably inverting that in my memory. It's probably this guy, because it's a white dog. I remember that. Here. Follow me. There we go. Come here. Yeah, they're going to have a lizard problem next. Then a horse problem. Then a Zerg problem. There we go. Yep, I was inverting it. I'm dumb. I'm the dumbest. Okay. Yeah, then they're gonna have a re-dead problem. So, nice little touch that they added with this one. This is part of the UI design. They actually, I know you can't see it, but they literally show you all of the songs on the lower screen. So you can just look at it and hit it from there if you don't remember it. Now, normally I'd be like, oh, good, elitism, elitism. But I actually really like that inclusion. Especially on the 3DS version, because I don't have the 3DS songs memorized at all. Except for Zelda's song, that's the only one. There we go, so let's get this one. Now, I want you guys to help me with something, because I'm debating a plus here. And it's basically a plus for side quests, to summarize it. You'll notice that this is all stuff we can do relatively normally before we progress the main plot. In fact, there's actually even more stuff we could do right now before progressing the main plot. There's a decent amount of side content in this game. In fact, there will be in all 3 of the games we're playing for this core lore run. Now, as always, it's kind of dependent on the quality of said side content, which is why I'm curious of your guys' thought. It's so weird to not roll through this game. You have no idea. I've been rolling through Zelda games since I first played this one, but arguably since LTTP, as soon as you get the Pegasus boots. I mean, I can't be the only one who Pegasus boots everywhere in LTTP, right? It's actually harder to do the Z backward work in this one than it is in 64, believe it or not. I guess I can explain why really quick. So, if you nudge it a little bit to the side, you do that, or that, which is substantially slower. So I try not to do that too much unless I'm really in a hurry, like right at the beginning. Whoops. Probably one of the biggest detriments of this version is something that shouldn't even be a thing, right? Anyways, it's Dompe, the Gravekeeper. Oh, it's just a mask. I get a different kind of fright from that mask than I get from Dompe. Will you give that mask to me? With this mask, I'll be just like Dompe. He gave you a lot of money. Woo! I'm gonna dig and dig, just like Dompe. I mean, everyone's gotta have a hobby, right? That's kind of what we're working on, Supreme Mook. Enjoy the water park. Oh, nip, 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 nip. No, she doesn't, Eric. If you give me a moment, I can pull it up. Give me a second. Actually, it's on the website. What am I saying? Go check the website. Mwahahaha. I force you. Evil laughter. Look, I spent like 3 hours updating the website yesterday. It takes forever to convert all that stuff into code for the friggin' website. There has got to be a way to automate that. I've actually put serious thought into, rather than updating a Google Doc, just updating the website with pluses as I go. The problem is that would be a colossal hassle too, so... That's not happening either. Yeah, there's a lot of little tiny side stories, too. I mentioned the NPCs and the flavor. There's more world building in this than there has been in a Zelda up to this point. I can't call it good, but it's at least there. Like, there's that building that's half constructed. In the future, that building will actually be constructed. It's the one all the carpenters are working on. And they will come up in another story, unrelated. I'll take that. Best item in the game. My favorite part here, I'll show this off. Give me a second. Actually, let's do something else real quick. Give me just a second, guys. Good evening, Crazy Norse. Actually, only 2 people are dancing in the plaza, Tara. So we've got these people over here. They're trying to buy stuff. These 2 are laughing, because they're dumb. These people are trying to buy stuff. She's actually got an itch on the back. She just really likes her dog. These 2 are dancing, however. And it's because they're so in love. Any questions? Shouldn't that only be 40 rupees? I must have screwed something up. No, whatever. Yeah, there's actually a lot of reuse of models to save on memory on the card. They did the same thing in Wind Waker, actually. Seriously, look at Outset Town, or Outset Island. Almost every NPC there's like 3 models between them. They do a decent job of hiding it, but, you know... Oh, right. Horse. It's okay, we want it to be nighttime for the horse anyways. Can I just say I really dislike the analog in the 3disc? You see how much trouble I'm having just going forward? Anyways, Ventures, sorry, I'm not ignoring you. I actually answered that earlier, but to answer in brief... this is the core Zelda Lorerun, covering the 3 games that are most connected to each other. Now, I have already discussed Skyward Sword, and we'll be discussing the rest of the Zelda series as well, of course. But this is the major thrust of the Zelda lore. Most of the other Zelda games aren't really connected. Yeah, this is basically the Ganondorf trilogy. I wish I'd come up with that term, but I didn't. Oh, yeah. Right. God, pay attention, Laura. Well, now I'm gonna have to stab you, Ventures. Stab! There we go. Okay, we're good. That's actually inaccurate, though. It'd be more accurate to say there are 2 timelines that we're covering here. Which we're in neither yet at the moment. Basically, everything we're going to be seeing in this game is effectively the Twilight Princess timeline. The Wind Waker timeline is the branch. We'll only be seeing that for literally seconds at the end of the game. Thank you, Eric. Oh, it's Fairy Boy. I heard you found my dad. How'd you like the castle? Did you see the princess? And now we're married forever. You have to talk to her like 3 times before you can learn the damn song. No, Crazy Norse. No, we're not, Boogity. We're seeing the... Oh, I guess that's fair. Okay, we're seeing the events of the Twilight Princess Link in what will become the Wind Waker timeline. You are correct. I was thinking of it from the wrong perspective. Sorry. So, to explain what Poogity's talking about. At the very end of this game, spoilers, Zelda is going to send us back to the beginning, and that's going to effectively spawn a completely new timeline, the Twilight Princess timeline. Now, the reason I got that confused is the Twilight Princess timeline follows this Link. In short, from the perspective of Link, we go through Ocarina, and then we hit the Twilight Princess timeline. However, from the perspective of everyone else, the events of Ocarina happen, and then Link leaves the timeline. And that leads to the Wind Waker timeline. And yes, all three of these games cover the same character, Ganondorf, the common thread that binds them. Hence the Ganondorf Trilogy. Yeah, I have to admit, I don't like calling them Child Timeline and Adult Timeline, because I always get that frickin' confused. I just prefer Twilight Timeline and Wind Waker Timeline. It makes it a lot easier for me. So forgive me if I use that terminology. But anyways, the long and the short of it is, as I mentioned earlier, Ocarina was designed to be kind of a baked-in prequel to LTTP, which was a baked-in prequel to Zelda 2. And Wind Waker and Twilight were designed ground up to be sequels for Ocarina, excuse me. Everything else, a little more vague. But these three are pretty tightly connected. These are all direct sequels of each other. This would be a case of Type 3 time travel, pretty definitively. So anytime time travel... Well, that's not fair. So we're actually... That's a good question, Finn. I'm going to probably circle back around to that point once we get to the point which we time travel, when we stop being a kid. There's actually two types of time travel here. One is Type 1 time travel, and that's actually demonstrated, if among other places, by the Song of Storms situation. And plenty of other examples indicate that most of this game is actually Type 1 time travel. It is Zelda, at the end, who pushes us into a different timeline, creating a Type 3 time travel situation, aka a different timeline. Now, the niggle there, the part that doesn't make sense, and the part that doesn't work, is the third timeline, which apparently just happens on its own, even though by every other metric, that doesn't work that way. There's no multiple timeline crafting going on. It is Zelda's specific interruption and action that crafts a separate timeline. And I've talked about this before. Arguably, that was a mistake on her part. Anyways, I am well into my lunch break, so I'm going to go ahead and pause here.